What if I told you that everything you see around you, the stars, the oceans, the very air you breathe, was once shaped not by random chants, but by sound? Not just any sound, but a cosmic symphony so powerful it could build worlds, command elements, and even whisper destiny into being. These were the 27 sacred sounds, the primordial vibrations that ancient civilizations believed were the very language of creation itself. For thousands of years, these frequencies echoed through temples, resonated in rituals, and hummed within the hearts of mystics and seers. They weren't just noises, they were living forces, the audible architecture of reality. And then one day they fell silent. Think about the deepest silence you've ever experienced. Maybe it was in a remote forest, or high on a mountain, or in the quiet hours before dawn. Now imagine that silence stretching across the entire cosmos. No hum of planets, no chant of creation, no echo of divine breath. That's the world we live in today, a world that has, in many ways, gone deaf to the harmonies that once ruled existence. But why? What happened to these profound vibrations that cultures from India to Greece, from Egypt to Scandinavia, once revered as sacred? How could something so central to human understanding simply vanish from our collective memory? And perhaps most importantly, could we ever hear them again? That's the mystery we're setting out to solve in this video. Together, we'll travel across time and tradition, dusting off ancient texts, revisiting forgotten myths, and really listening for the echoes of what was lost. We'll explore the arm that sparked the Hindu universe, the logos that ordered Greek thought, the hum of Yggdrasil that held the Norse worlds together. We'll hear the solar chants of Egyptian priests, the fateful songs of sirens, and the rhythmic drum of Shiva that still beats at the heart of time. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a rediscovery, a re-enchantment, an invitation to remember that our universe wasn't always this quiet, and that somewhere beneath the noise of modern life, a deeper music might still be playing, waiting for us to learn how to listen one more time. Before there was light, before there was matter, there was sound. Not the random noise we hear in our everyday lives, but a profound, structured, and intentional vibration that ancient cultures understood as the very first act of creation. This was the cosmic symphony, a harmonious blueprint from which all of existence was woven. Imagine the universe not as a silent, cold vacuum, but as a living, resonant chamber, humming with the frequencies of divine intention. In these ancient worldviews, sound was the original architect. The Hindu sages called this concept Nada Brahma. The world is sound. They taught that the entire cosmos, from the swirling galaxies to the beating of your own heart, is a manifestation of a primordial vibration, a single note that expanded into the infinite complexity of life. This wasn't a metaphor to them, it was a literal, physical truth. They heard this truth in the rhythmic chants of their rituals, feeling the power of specific syllables to alter consciousness and reality itself. This belief in a sonic foundation for reality was a global phenomenon, a thread connecting disparate cultures across continents and millennia. In ancient Greece, the philosopher Pythagoras and his followers developed the theory of the music of the spheres. They proposed that the planets and stars, as they moved through the heavens, did not move in silence. Each celestial body, with its unique size, speed, and orbital path, emitted its own distinct harmonic tone. Together, these tones formed a magnificent, perpetual celestial symphony, a music so perfect and mathematically precise that human ears, clouded by the imperfections of the material world, were simply unable to perceive it. This wasn't just poetry, it was an early form of scientific inquiry. an attempt to explain the observable order of the universe through the elegant laws of vibration and harmony. So what were these 27 sacred sounds? Think of them not as a random collection of noises, but as a universal harmonic code. This was the operating system of the cosmos. Each sound was a unique frequency that corresponded to a fundamental aspect of creation. One frequency might be tied to the element of water, another to the emotion of compassion, another to a specific celestial body like Saturn or Venus. A shaman in the Americas chanting to bring rain, a druid in Europe intoning a blessing for a newborn, a Vedic priest in India reciting a mantra to ensure a good harvest. They were all, in their own ways, accessing different lines of this same universal code. They were tuning their own beings, their own voices, to resonate with these foundational frequencies, believing that through this resonance they could manifest change, heal illness, command natural forces, and even commune with the divine. The power attributed to these sounds was absolute. Egyptian creation myths describe the god Ptah speaking the names of all things into existence. In the Abrahamic traditions, God says, "Let there be light," and there is light creation through utterance. Norse legends tell of Odin learning the secret of the runes, their sounds granting him power over life and death. These stories are more than just fanciful tales. They are profound psychological and spiritual insights into the nature of reality. They suggest that vibration precedes form, that the audible word holds a creative potency that the written word later merely describes. This sets the stage for our journey ahead, because to understand why these sounds went silent, we must first truly appreciate their immense power and the central role they played in how humanity once understood its place in a singing, resonant universe. Before anything else existed, before the concepts of time or space had even been imagined, there was only a profound and absolute silence, a nothingness so complete it wasn't even an emptiness, because emptiness implies a space to be empty. This was the state the ancient Hindu texts call Brahman, the ultimate, unchanging reality, formless and silent. And then, from within that infinite potential, the very first thing to manifest was not a god, not a light, but a sound. A single, resonant vibration that rippled through the void, and in doing so, began to weave the fabric of the cosmos itself. That sound was Om. It is described as the primordial seed, the bija, from which the entire tree of existence grew. Every galaxy, every mountain, every living creature is, in this ancient view, simply a different expression of that original vibrational frequency. It is the hum of the universe switching on. This sacred syllable is far more complex than a simple word. It is visually represented by a unique Sanskrit symbol, but its sonic structure is a triad, a trilogy of sounds folded into one. It begins with a pronounced ah, a sound formed deep in the throat, symbolizing the state of waking consciousness and the act of creation, of beginnings. It flows into u, pronounced u, which resonates in the middle of the mouth, representing the dream state and the energy of preservation, of maintaining what has been created. It culminates in m, pronounced mm, where the lips meet and the sound is internalized, signifying the state of deep sleep and the inevitable process of dissolution. The silence that follows the chant is considered a fourth, unseen element, turiya, the state of pure consciousness that transcends the other three. This single syllable encapsulates the entire cycle of existence: birth, life, death, and rebirth, and the full spectrum of human awareness. The wisdom of this vibration is deeply embedded in India's oldest spiritual texts. The Mandukya Upanishad is entirely dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of Om, explaining it as the essence of all that is, was, and will be. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna declares to the warrior Arjuna, "I am the syllable Om in all the Vedas. positioning himself as the very sound of the divine. Sages and yogis for millennia have used the repetitive chanting of Om, a practice known as japa, as a vehicle to cross the ocean of illusion and attain enlightenment. They understood that its vibration is not just symbolic, it has a physical effect. The specific frequency is said to resonate with and gently realign the body's energy centers, the chakras, clearing blockages and purifying the consciousness. It's a sonic tuning fork for the human soul, bringing an individual's vibration back into harmony with the universal hum. There is a powerful story told of an advanced yogi deep in meditation high in the Himalayas. For days, he had been in a state of intense concentration, his chant of Om the only sound breaking the mountain silence. As he chanted, he wasn't just repeating a word, he was pouring his entire awareness into the essence of the sound, seeking to merge with it. The legend says that as he reached the peak of his practice, he did not just hear the sound, he became the sound. His individual consciousness dissolved, and in that moment he experienced samadhi, a state of union with the Absolute. And in that state, he didn't hear a universe humming in response. He felt that he was the hum of the universe. He was the Om itself, the vibration that sustained the stars above him and the rocks beneath him. This story illustrates the ultimate goal, to move from hearing the sacred sound to embodying it completely. So what happened? If this sound is the very fabric of reality, why is it not constantly ringing in our ears? Why did its thunderous, all-pervading presence recede into a whisper that must be consciously sought in the quiet corners of meditation halls? The silence of Om in our everyday world is not a sign that the vibration has stopped. The ancient texts would argue it never could. Instead, its fading from our collective awareness marks a profound disconnection. We have, as a species, become so enveloped in the noise of our own making, the clatter of machinery, the din of digital information, the internal chatter of our anxieties, that we have lost the ability to perceive the fundamental frequency humming just beneath it all. We've become deaf to our own origin story. The Om did not go silent, we simply forgot how to listen. And so its persistent, quiet call is now an invitation, even an urgent plea, for us to turn inward to quiet the external noise and to remember the sound of our own beginning. Meanwhile, in the sun-drenched agora of ancient Greece, a radically different yet strangely parallel concept of cosmic sound was taking shape. It wasn't a chant or a hum, but something even more fundamental. The principle of reason itself given a voice. The philosopher Heraclitus, around 500 years before the Common Era, introduced the term logos to the Western world. For him, this was not merely a word, it was the underlying rational principle that governed the entire cosmos, the divine reasoning that brought order out of primal chaos. He famously said that while most people are asleep to this truth, those who are awake inhabit a common world structured by this logos. It was the fire of intelligence that animated the universe, a cosmic law that could be heard and understood if one only learned to listen to the logic of nature. This idea was later adopted and expanded by the Stoic philosophers, who saw the logos as a divine, active reason pervading all of existence, a sort of world soul that directed everything toward a rational and harmonious end. It was the sound of pure, structured thought echoing through creation. This powerful Greek concept then performed one of the most remarkable feats in the history of ideas. It crossed a cultural and religious boundary and found a new home. In the opening lines of the Gospel of John, written in Greek, the author makes a breathtaking claim that would fuse Hellenistic philosophy with Jewish mysticism forever. In the beginning was the Word, he writes, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The term used for word here is explicitly logos. This was a seismic shift. The abstract principle of rational order was now personified, identified as a divine being active in creation and later incarnated in Christ. This logos was the agent through whom all things were made. It was the blueprint of reality spoken into existence. The sound was no longer an impersonal force but the very voice of God, imbuing the universe with meaning, purpose, and structure from the very first moment. A key figure bridging these two worlds was Philo of Alexandria, a first-century Hellenistic Jewish philosopher. Philo took the concept of the logos and developed it into a sophisticated theological idea. He described the logos as the intermediary between a transcendent, unknowable God and the material world. It was the first-born son of God, the high priest, the architect of the cosmos, and the rational principle that implants natural law into the fabric of existence. For Philo, the logos was the tool God used to create and the means by which humanity could comprehend the divine. It was the resonant channel through which the infinite touched the finite. This idea provided a crucial vocabulary for early Christian theologians to explain how Jesus could be both divine and human. He was the logos made flesh, the divine reason and creative word embodied in a single person. The sound had taken on a human form, and this was not a silent, abstract philosophy for the early faithful. It was a vibration to be harnessed. Many early Christian mystics, particularly in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, believed that specific phrases and chants could invoke this same creative power of the logos. They developed a practice known as hesychasm, which involved the repetitive, rhythmic prayer of the Jesus Prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. The constant repetition of this sacred phrase, synchronized with the breath, was believed to quiet the mind and allow the practitioner to hear the divine logos within their own heart, to achieve a union with God. The sound of the prayer itself was thought to be a vessel for grace, a sonic key that unlocked the door to the divine. Perhaps no story illustrates this belief in the power of resonant chant more than the legend of Saint Cassiane, a 9th-century Byzantine hymnist and abbess. She is most famous for composing a profound hymn still sung on Holy Wednesday, a piece of such beauty and theological depth it is said to have been divinely inspired. The legend goes that as she composed and her nuns chanted these hymns, their voices, lifted in perfect faith and harmony, didn't just ask for miracles, they enacted them. There are tales of the sick being healed in the presence of their singing, of a tangible peace descending upon their monastery, and of their chants somehow bridging the gap between heaven and earth, making the divine presence momentarily audible. For them, the logos was not a dead concept in a book. It was a living, vibrating force that could be channeled through disciplined, faithful sound, making the power of the word present again in the world. But then, a slow and profound silence began to descend. As Western thought marched forward through the Enlightenment, the logos began to change. The rise of rationalism and scientific materialism sought to explain the world through observable cause and effect, through mathematics and logic, but it stripped these concepts of their sacred, sonic character. The logos was gradually abstracted. It became a subject for philosophical debate, a term in a theological textbook, a historical curiosity. It was translated as reason, logic, or word, but it lost its essential quality as a creative, audible, divine vibration that structured reality. The transition was from a heard harmony to a silent concept. We gained a more clinical understanding of the universe, but we lost the sense that the universe was speaking to us, that it was built upon a foundation of intelligent sound. We are left to wonder what was truly lost when the word, in all its resonant power, stopped being something we listened for and became merely something we read about. Now journey north to a world of icy fjords and long winter nights, where the Norse people envisioned the entire cosmos not as a sphere or a void, but as a living, breathing tree. This was Yggdrasil, the immense and eternal world ash, its gnarled roots digging deep into the underworld, its mighty trunk piercing the realm of humanity, and its vast branches cradling the homes of the gods high above. But this was not a silent tree. The ancient sagas and poems, the Eddas, describe it as constantly humming, vibrating with a deep, resonant frequency that was the very pulse of existence. This hum was the sound of life itself coursing through its bark and leaves, the audible signal that the 9 interconnected worlds it held were alive and functioning. It was the breath of the cosmos, a low, steady tone that harmonized everything from the primal waters of fate at its roots to the lofty songs of the eagles perched in its highest boughs. This cosmic hum was more than just background noise. It was the essential rhythm that maintained the delicate balance of all things. The Norns, the 3 powerful beings of destiny, sat at one of Yggdrasil's roots, weaving the fates of gods and men alike. Their work was not silent. It was a song, a chant that intertwined with the tree's own vibration, their voices blending into the hum to shape the threads of what was, is, and will be. The well of Erd, the source of destiny itself, was said to bubble and churn in time with this sound. To hear the hum of Yggdrasil was to tap directly into the underlying current of reality, to understand the interconnectedness of all life and the unyielding flow of fate. It was a sound only the gods, the most gifted seers, and the bravest of heroes could perceive clearly, a secret melody that held the universe together. The Vikings, a people often stereotyped as mere warriors, possessed a deep and sophisticated magical tradition centered on sound, specifically the power of runes. They believed that these angular symbols were not merely letters to be written, but were vessels of immense power, each one possessing its own unique sound and vibration. The act of chanting or singing these runes, a practice known as Galder, was a way for a skilled practitioner to consciously attune their own voice to the specific frequency of a rune, and by extension, to tap into the great hum of Yggdrasil itself. A warrior might chant the rune to, as the sound resonating with the power of the god Tyr, to grant courage and ensure victory in battle. A farmer might sing the rune Fe, to attract prosperity and fertility to his land. This was a technology of vibration, a way to borrow a fragment of the world tree's power for protection, healing, or foresight. No story better illustrates the profound connection between sound, sacrifice, and wisdom than Odin's own ordeal upon Yggdrasil. The All-Father, in his relentless quest for knowledge, hanged himself from the wind-swept branches of the world tree, pierced by his own spear. He hung there for 9 nights and 9 days, a sacrifice unto himself, teetering on the brink of death. And in that state of extreme agony and ecstatic revelation, the legends say he heard it. Beneath the howl of the wind and the beating of his own heart, he perceived the deep, foundational hum of Yggdrasil. It was in listening to this sound, this eternal pulse of the cosmos, that the secrets of the runes were finally revealed to him. He didn't just see them, he understood their resonant power, their sacred sounds, and he grasped them, falling from the tree reborn with ultimate knowledge. The hum was the medium through which the universe's greatest secrets were transmitted. This vibrant, sonic worldview, however, could not withstand the relentless tide of change. With a gradual spread of Christianity throughout Scandinavia, the old gods and the old ways were systematically suppressed. The sacred groves where people might have gathered to listen for the tree's pulse were cut down. The practice of Galder was condemned as pagan witchcraft and driven underground. The stories of Yggdrasil and its hum were slowly pushed from living belief into the realm of story and legend, preserved only in dusty manuscripts like the poetic Edda. The hum did not stop. The tree, in the myth, is eternal, but humanity's collective ear was turned away from it. we stopped listening. This silencing represents something far deeper than just a religious shift. It symbolizes a catastrophic rupture in our ancestral connection to the natural world and its inherent rhythms. We ceased to believe that a tree could hold a universe in its branches and sing its story. That leaves us with a haunting, beautiful question. If we were to walk into an old-growth forest today, to place our hands upon the rough bark of an ancient oak or a towering sequoia, and to be utterly still and silent, what would we hear? Is the hum of Yggdrasil truly gone, or have we just forgotten the language to understand it? The silence that followed the old Norse faith is not an empty one, it is an invitation. It asks us to reconsider the wisdom we might have lost in our rush toward a purely material world. It urges us to listen not just with our ears, but with our entire being, to the wind in the leaves, the creak of ancient wood, and the deep, quiet pulse of the earth itself, wondering if faint, residual echoes of that cosmic frequency might still remain, waiting for a time when we are once again ready to hear. Now, let's travel across the Mediterranean to the sun-baked banks of the Nile, where the daily miracle of the sunrise was not taken for granted, but actively summoned into being by human voice. In the immense columned halls of Karnak Temple, as the first sliver of light breached the eastern horizon, a meticulously trained priesthood would begin a sacred ritual. Their voices, rising in a complex harmonic chant, were not songs of praise in the way we might understand them today. They were instruments of cosmic maintenance. These priests of Amun-Ra, the great king of the gods whose very essence was the sun itself, believed their specific combination of tones and vowels possessed the power to literally awaken the deity from his nightly journey through the perilous underworld. This was the chant of Amun-Ra, a resonant technology designed to vibrate in sympathy with the solar bark, the vessel carrying the sun god, ensuring its safe passage and the daily rebirth of light and life for all of Egypt. Failure was not an option. The entire world depended on the precision of their sound. This practice was deeply rooted in the Egyptian concept of Heka, a word often translated as magic, but which meant something far more profound. Heka was the underlying creative force of the universe, the divine energy that existed before the gods themselves and which they used to fashion the world. Sound, and particularly the human voice articulating the true names of things, was considered one of the most potent conduits for wielding Heka. The correct chant, uttered with the proper intention by a purified priest, didn't just ask the gods for help. It vibrated with the same frequency as creation itself, compelling reality to conform to its command. It was a science of vibration where specific sonic formulas could protect the sun bark from the serpent Apophis, heal a sick child, or bring fertility to the fields. The chant was a key that turned the lock of the cosmos. We find the most powerful evidence of this belief etched in stone deep within the oldest pyramids. The pyramid texts, a collection of spells and utterances dating back to the 24th century before the Common Era, are not meant to be read silently. They are a script for sound. These inscriptions provided the deceased pharaoh with the precise chants and declarations he needed to navigate the afterlife, to transform into an Ak, a glorified spirit, and to ascend to join the circumpolar stars. One spell, for instance, involves the king proclaiming his identity with various gods and elements of the cosmos, his voice becoming the vehicle for his own apotheoses. The power was in the utterance. The pyramid itself, with its resonating chambers and narrow passageways, may have acted as a massive sound amplifier, designed to focus and project these world-altering vibrations directly into the heavens. The design of Egyptian temples further reveals their sophisticated understanding of acoustic power. These were not just houses of worship, they were immense ritual instruments. The progression from the loud, open outer courts to the silent, hidden darkness of the inner sanctuary was a journey inwards, from the noise of the world to the focused, potent silence from which sacred sound could emerge. Certain chambers, like the famous hypostyle hall at Karnak with its forest of massive columns, create stunning acoustic effects. A whisper at one end can be clearly heard at the other, and a chant, once released, would reverberate and multiply, swirling around the stone pillars and creating an immersive, otherworldly soundscape. This was not an accident. It was architectural hecka designed to magnify the priest's voice, to make it sound less human and more divine, allowing the vibration to saturate the sacred space and achieve its intended effect on the unseen world. Legend speaks of a time when a terrible plague swept through the city of Thebes, striking down young and old alike. The physicians were powerless and despair gripped the people. The high priest of Amun-Ra, after days of fasting and purification, entered the innermost sanctuary of the temple as dawn approached. Instead of the usual communal chant, he uttered a single, sustained note, a frequency known only to his lineage, charged with the full force of his will and the authority of his office. The story says the sound did not seem loud within the temple, but it vibrated outwards through the very stone of the building and into the earth. As the note hung in the air, the spread of the plague is said to have halted abruptly. Those who were sick began to recover with shocking speed. The priest's chant, a precise application of sonic hecka, had acted as a divine antibiotic, resetting the spiritual and physical health of the community by realigning its vibrational harmony. Yet, where are those frequencies today? The mighty temples of Amun-Ra stand as magnificent ruins, their halls silent but for the whisper of the wind and the chatter of tourists. The precise tonal recipes, the exact vowel modulations that could awaken a god or cure a plague, are lost to us. They were part of an oral tradition, a secret knowledge passed from master to initiate, never fully written down. The decline of the Egyptian religion under Greek and then Roman rule, and its final suppression with the rise of Christianity, severed this chain of transmission. The sacred language itself became a dead language, its sounds fossilized in hieroglyphs we can read but no longer truly hear. The silence that settled over the Nile Valley is a profound monument to the fragility of knowledge. It reminds us that entire worlds of understanding, sophisticated technologies of spirit and sound that sustained a civilization for 3,000 years, can vanish within a few generations, leaving behind only silent stones and unanswered questions. Far out in the wine-dark sea, beyond the charts of any mortal sailor, lay an island that was not an island at all, but a trap. Its shores were not sand and rock, but the bleached bones of those who had come before, drawn by a sound so beautiful it severed the soul from all sense of self-preservation. This was the domain of the sirens, and their weapon was not claw nor tooth, but song. In Homer's epic, the Odyssey, their melody is the ultimate test of will, a sonic siren call that promised to reveal all the secrets of the world to any who listened. It was a sound that offered ultimate knowledge, but at the ultimate price. To hear it was to be consumed by it, to abandon home, family, and life itself in a desperate, ecstatic attempt to get closer to the source of such perfect, devastating beauty. This was sound not as creation or order, but as pure, irresistible fate, a vibration that could override human instinct and rewrite destiny itself. To view the siren's song as merely a deadly lure is to miss its profound, terrifying complexity. Later Greek philosophers, particularly the Platonists, saw a much deeper allegory at play. They reinterpreted the sirens not as monsters, but as divine beings. Each siren was thought to be attached to one of the celestial spheres in the Ptolemaic model of the universe. Their song was the fabled music of the spheres, the harmonic music produced by the perfect motion of the planets and stars. For these thinkers, the reason the siren's song was so fatally captivating was that it was the sound of cosmic truth itself, the ultimate knowledge of how the universe works. The problem for mortals was that this music was not meant for human ears. To hear the unfiltered, overwhelming harmony of the cosmos was an experience the human mind simply could not survive. It was enlightenment and destruction fused into a single, unbearable frequency. The song wasn't evil, it was simply too much truth for a mortal soul to contain. This duality is perfectly captured in the most famous scene involving them, the ordeal of Odysseus. On the advice of the sorceress Circe, he orders his crew to plug their ears with beeswax, rendering them deaf to the enchanting melody. But Odysseus, driven by an insatiable curiosity that defines his entire journey, insists on hearing it for himself. He has his men tie him tightly to the ship's mast, commanding them under no circumstances to release him, no matter how violently he begs and pleads. As the ship passes the island, the song washes over him. It promises him wisdom beyond measure, knowledge of all things that have happened and will happen. It is the ultimate seduction of the intellect, and true to form, Odysseus struggles against his bonds, screaming to be set free so he may go to the source of this divine knowledge. His men, deaf to the temptation, only bind him tighter. This is not just a clever trick, it is one of mythology's most powerful metaphors for the human condition. It represents our eternal struggle between the desire for transcendent, dangerous knowledge and the need for the mundane safety of ignorance. Odysseus is every one of us, tied to the mast of our own limitations, yearning for a truth we know might shatter us. There is a haunting epilogue to their story in some versions of the myth. It was said that if a sailor could somehow resist the siren's call, the beings themselves were fated to die. Their power and their existence were entirely contingent on the surrender of their victims. In one telling, after Odysseus escapes them, the sirens, in their despair and failure, throw themselves into the sea and are transformed into rocks. This adds another layer of tragic depth. Their song was not just a predatory act, it was their essence, their reason for being. They were as much prisoners of their own music as the sailors were victims of it. This transforms them from simple villains into tragic figures, bound to sing a song that destroys others and ultimately themselves if it ever fails. Their power is also their profound curse. The rationalization of Greek myths over centuries, however, slowly stripped the sirens of this profound symbolic weight. As society moved away from mystical explanations and toward more logical, scientific ones, the sirens were gradually reduced. They became simplified into mere monsters in bestiaries, their connection to cosmic harmony and forbidden knowledge completely severed. Their dangerous, alluring song was silenced, replaced by a simple warning against the perceived dangers of female seduction. This was a catastrophic loss of a nuanced idea. The sirens, in their original form, represented the terrifying and beautiful truth that some knowledge is double-edged, that the pursuit of ultimate truth can be as destructive as it is enlightening. Their silencing meant losing a vital cultural metaphor for the price of wisdom and the inherent danger and allure of the unknown. We were left with a safer, simpler world, but one that had forgotten how to hear the dangerous music that beckons from the edge of the map. Within the boundless expanse of Hindu cosmology, where creation and dissolution are not events but a continuous, breathing process, there is a rhythm, a primal, eternal pulse that sets the tempo for the entire dance of existence. This is the sound of Shiva's Damaru, a small, hourglass-shaped drum that beats not just to mark time, but to generate it. When Shiva, as Nataraja, the lord of the dance, begins his cosmic performance, every movement is an act of creation, and every beat of this drum is the metronome for the universe itself. It is the first sound of order emerging from chaos, the vibration that structures the formless into galaxies, planets, and life. This is not a gentle rhythm. It is the powerful, unstoppable heartbeat of reality, signaling the simultaneous and inseparable processes of destruction and renewal. To everything there is a season, and the Damaru is the sound of every season turning at once. The most iconic representation of this profound truth is found in the Nataraja icon, a statue of Shiva captured mid-dance within a ring of flames. One hand holds the Damaru, raised and ready to sound. Another hand holds the fire of destruction, which clears away the old and worn out. Another hand is held in a gesture of fearless reassurance, saying, "Do not be afraid," while a fourth points down to the earth, to the uplifted foot that offers liberation. The entire dance takes place upon the body of a dwarf, symbolizing ignorance and illusion. The message is breathtakingly comprehensive. Through the rhythm of his drum, Shiva orchestrates a dance that destroys the universe only to recreate it again, all while crushing ignorance beneath his foot and offering a path to transcendent freedom. The drumbeat is the catalyst, the sound that initiates this entire cosmic cycle. It is the frequency of change itself, but the power of this drumbeat extends far beyond the cosmic scale and into the very fabric of language and thought. Ancient tantric texts reveal a stunning belief. The specific rhythm of Shiva's Damaru is said to have produced the 14 core sounds known as the Maheshvara Sutras, which are the foundational building blocks of the entire Sanskrit language. This means that every word, every poem, every sacred mantra and philosophical treatise in Sanskrit is, in this view, ultimately an emanation of that original drumbeat. The universe was not just created to a rhythm, it was created from a rhythm that contained the seed of all communication and knowledge. The sound structures reality not just physically, but intellectually and spiritually, providing the phonetic matrix from which all meaning can arise. This understanding is not meant to be merely philosophical. It is a practical tool for inner transformation. For centuries, tantric practitioners and yogis have used the concept of this eternal rhythm as a focus for deep meditation. They don't just think about the drumbeat, they strive to hear it internally, to visualize Shiva's dance within their own consciousness, and to synchronize their own breath and heartbeat with that primordial pulse. The goal is to achieve a state of resonance where the individual self dissolves into the universal rhythm, allowing the meditator to transcend the illusion of a separate, static identity and experience the true, flowing nature of reality. It is a way of using sound, even imagined sound, to break down the ego's walls and remember one's place in the cosmic dance. There is a powerful account of a modern-day devotee on a pilgrimage to a temple in South India dedicated to Nataraja. Overwhelmed by the noise of his own mind, anxieties about the future, regrets about the past, he sat in the temple hall for hours, unable to quiet his thoughts. As he gazed at the towering statue of the dancing Shiva, his focus shifted from the form to the idea of the drum in its hand. He began to mentally replicate the sound, a steady, rapid diggy-digga-diggy rhythm. He poured all of his chaotic mental energy into focusing on this single, internalized sound. The story goes that as his concentration deepened, his internal chatter didn't just stop, it was absorbed into the rhythm. His anxieties became part of the beat, his fears another vibration in the pattern, until there was no distinction between the sound and himself. He experienced not silence, but a profound, ordered symphony within, and in that moment, he felt a visceral understanding of how destruction of the old self makes way for the renewal of a new one. He wasn't listening to the rhythm, he had become the rhythm. In our contemporary world, however, that primordial rhythm is increasingly difficult to perceive. We live enveloped in a cacophony of artificial noise, the relentless ping of notifications, the hum of traffic, the incessant drone of media. This isn't just auditory pollution. It's a vibrational dissonance that pulls us completely out of sync with the natural, cyclical laws that the Damaru represents. Our culture prizes constant growth, endless production, and the avoidance of endings at all costs. We fight against the natural cycles of decay and rebirth in our lives, our businesses, and our environments. In doing so, we drown out the very sound that teaches us that dissolution is not an enemy, but a necessary partner to creation. The fading echo of Shiva's drum is a symptom of our profound disconnection from the fundamental pulse of life, death, and rebirth that governs everything from the cells in our body to the stars in the sky. This leaves us with a silent, urgent invitation. The drum has not stopped beating, our ability to hear it has simply atrophied. Its persistent, though quiet, echo is a call to action, a reminder to actively seek out stillness. It asks us to turn off the external noise, even for a few moments each day, to sit in silence and listen not for nothingness, but for the underlying rhythm. Perhaps we can hear it in the steady pattern of our own heart, in the cyclical turn of the seasons, or in the inevitable endings and new beginnings that shape our lives. To listen for the drumbeat of Shiva is to choose to re-engage with the cosmic dance, to find comfort in the rhythm of change, and to understand that within every ending lies the essential seed of the next beginning. High atop Mount Helicon in Greece, or sometimes on Pieria, there was a place where the air itself seemed to shimmer with potential. This was the domain of the 9 Muses, the daughters of Zeus and the Titaness Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory. They were not simply patrons of the arts, they were the very embodiment of creative and intellectual endeavor. Calliope for epic poetry, Clio for history, Eroto for love poetry, Euterpe for music, Melpomene for tragedy, Polyhymnia for sacred hymns, Terpsichore for dance, Thalia for comedy, and Urania for astronomy. Each sister governed a specific channel of human expression, and their gift to humanity was not a shout or a song, but something far more subtle and profound, a whisper. This was not a sound that traveled through the air to be captured by the ear. It was a divine influx, a sudden breath of clarity and beauty that seemed to arrive from nowhere, channeling the harmony of the heavens directly into the soul of a receptive mortal. To be inspired literally meant to be breathed into by the divine, and the Muses' whisper was that sacred breath. One of the earliest and most powerful testaments to this experience comes from the poet Hesiod in his monumental work, the Theogony, which chronicles the origins of the Greek gods. He doesn't begin by claiming his own genius. Instead, he opens with a humble and awe-struck confession. He describes being a simple shepherd on the slopes of Mount Helicon when the Muses themselves appeared to him. They breathed their sacred voice into him, as he says, so that he might celebrate the events of the future and the past. They commanded him to sing of the race of the blessed gods, but only after they had taught him his craft. Hesiod is utterly clear. The epic that follows is not his invention. He is merely the vessel, the mouthpiece for a wisdom and a beauty that originates from a source far beyond himself. His work is an echo of a cosmic beauty, made possible only because he was silent and receptive enough to hear the whisper that changed his life. This pursuit of the Muses' murmur did not end with the ancient world. It became a central obsession for artists centuries later during the Renaissance. This was a period that sought to reconcile human brilliance with divine inspiration. Figures like Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo were not just skilled craftsmen. They were seen as men who had somehow tapped into a higher source. They understood that the whisper of the muse was not found in the crowded marketplace or the noisy workshop. It was sought through deliberate ritual and cultivated solitude, A painter might retreat into quiet contemplation before touching brush to canvas. A composer might walk alone in nature to clear his mind, and a writer might observe strict routines of silence, all in an effort to create the internal quiet necessary to perceive that faint, inspirational breath. They were building an antenna for the divine, and static from the mundane world had to be eliminated. There are countless stories throughout history of creators who have experienced this not as a metaphor, but as a near-audible event. Consider the case of the Italian composer Giuseppe Tartini in the early 18th century. He famously described a dream in which he made a pact with the devil, who then seized a violin and played a sonata of such astonishing beauty and technical perfection that it left Tartini breathless. Upon waking, he immediately scrambled to transcribe what he could remember, resulting in his most famous work, the Devil's Trill Sonata. While he attributed it to the devil, the underlying archetype is the same, a sudden, overwhelming, and seemingly external infusion of complex artistic material. It was a glimpse of the Muses' voice, whether called divine or demonic, a moment where the veil parted and a fully formed piece of cosmic harmony downloaded itself into a human mind, demanding to be expressed. The composer felt less like a creator and more like a frantic scribe, trying to capture a fading echo before it vanished forever. Contrast that profound, receptive state with the environment most of us inhabit today. Our world is a fortress against silence, engineered to be a constant barrage of digital distraction. Notifications buzz, screens flicker with endless content, and headphones pump curated noise into our ears during every spare second of solitude. This constant auditory and mental clutter acts like a jammer for the Muses' frequency. How can the subtle breath of inspiration possibly be felt over the din of 100 push alerts and the compulsive scroll of a social media feed? The result is that creativity itself begins to feel different, less like a flowing, inspired state and more like a mechanical process. It becomes about output, productivity, algorithms, and trends. We manufacture content rather than channeling art. The Muses' whisper hasn't stopped. It's being shouted down by the noise of our own making, leaving our creative endeavors feeling hollow, forced, and disconnected from that deeper well of cosmic harmony. This pervasive silence, this absence of the inspirational breath, is not just a minor inconvenience for artists. It is a deep cultural challenge. It asks us a very difficult question. In a world that values constant connection and noise, are we willing to actively cultivate quiet? This isn't about waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about building a practice of receptivity. It means deliberately carving out time for boredom, for walking without a podcast, for sitting with a notebook instead of a phone, for staring out a window and allowing the mind to wander without a predetermined destination. It is in these unprogrammed, quiet gaps that the soil of the mind becomes fertile again. The challenge is to turn down the volume of the external world to amplify the faint, internal signals that have always been the true source of transformative art, groundbreaking ideas, and works that truly echo with the beauty of something far greater than ourselves. Long before the first dynasty unified the lands along the Yellow River, in the mythic age of primordial chaos, a profound silence was broken not by a god, but by a cultural hero who listened to the world's hidden frequencies. This was Fuxi, a half-dragon, half-man figure born of the cosmos itself, who is credited with gifting humanity the very foundations of civilization: marriage, hunting, fishing, and most importantly, writing. But his greatest gift was one of sound. Observing the patterns on the shell of a tortoise that emerged from the Luo River, Fuxi discerned the 8 trigrams, the Bagua, which became the core of the I Ching and the symbolic language of the universe. Yet he heard something else too, a fundamental, resonant tone that seemed to hum through the river reeds, the wind, and the very stones. he understood that this vibration was the sonic counterpart to the trigrams, a foundational pitch that could tune human activity to the immutable laws of heaven and earth, establishing order from the formless void. This was the discovery of the gong, not just as an instrument, but as a cosmic principle. This understanding of sound as a force of cosmic order was later codified in one of the most profound texts of antiquity, the Yggdrasil, or the Record of Music, a chapter in the ancient classic of rites. The Yggdrasil doesn't merely discuss musical theory for entertainment. It presents a complete cosmology where proper music is the essential pillar of a stable and harmonious state. It declares that music arises from the harmony of heaven and earth, and in turn creates harmony within the human heart. The text explicitly links the correct musical tones, scales, and instruments to the smooth functioning of the seasons, the prosperity of the harvest, and the moral character of the people. To play music that was dissonant or improperly tuned was not an artistic failure. It was a civic and spiritual catastrophe, a misalignment that could bring drought, famine, and social unrest. The emperor, as the son of heaven, had a sacred duty to ensure the state's music remained perfectly in tune with the cosmic order, the mandate of heaven made audible. The instruments designed to produce these sacred tones were therefore not mere noisemakers. They were precision tools of statecraft and spiritual technology. Ancient Chinese metallurgists and craftsmen developed ritual bells and gongs of astonishing acoustic complexity. Sets of bianzhong, bronze bells tuned to precise pitches, were cast and used in court rituals and ancestral sacrifices. The act of striking a specific gong was not a performance for an audience, but a deliberate act of resonance. It was believed that the resulting sound wave would travel outwards from the temple or palace, vibrating through the land and up into the heavens, signaling alignment or making a specific request to the celestial bureaucracy. The material, the shape, the exact pitch, every element was a variable in a grand equation aimed at maintaining the balance of yin and yang and the flow of kai, the life force of the universe. One enduring legend from the Zhou dynasty perfectly illustrates this belief in the tangible power of resonant sound. A terrible drought had gripped the land for months, withering crops and threatening the kingdom with famine. The emperor had exhausted all earthly solutions, prayers, offerings, consultations with oracles. In desperation, he summoned his most revered master of music, a man known for his perfect ear and deep understanding of the ancient sonic arts. The master did not bring seeds or water. He brought a single, large ritual gong. He fasted for 3 days to purify his spirit, and on the morning of the 4th day, as the sun crested the horizon, he struck the gong not with force but with a precise, measured tap. The note that rang out was clear, steady, and unwavering. It hung in the dry, still air, and as it faded, the story goes, a deep rumble of thunder was heard in response. By afternoon, the skies had opened, and a gentle, life-giving rain began to fall, ending the drought. The perfectly struck tone had not begged the heavens for rain. It had literally retuned the local atmosphere, correcting a dissonance in the natural order and allowing the rain, which was always potential, to manifest. For millennia, this intricate philosophy of resonance was a guiding principle of Chinese civilization, from the grand court ceremonies of the Forbidden City to the seasonal festivals in rural villages. However, the relentless tide of modernization, with its core values of efficiency, standardization, and material progress, gradually eroded this worldview. The ancient tones, once considered vital for the survival of the state, were increasingly viewed as superstitious or, at best, aesthetically pleasing artifacts. They were relegated to the museum and the ceremonial stage, their power diminished to that of cultural performance, a beautiful echo of a forgotten truth rather than the truth itself. Their cosmic role was silenced not by a single event, but by a slow societal shift in priorities that privileged the visible and the quantifiable over the subtle and the resonant. This profound silence left in the wake of progress invites a difficult but necessary question. In our relentless pursuit of a faster, more efficient world, what have we sacrificed? The ancient Chinese understood harmony not as a passive state of peace, but as an active, dynamic resonance between humanity, nature, and the cosmos. The Gong of Fuxi was a tool for maintaining that delicate, vital balance. Our modern age is undoubtedly one of incredible technological achievement, but it is also an age of profound dissonance, ecological imbalance, social fracture, and a deep, pervasive sense of anxiety. The fading of these foundational tones from our collective awareness serves as a poignant metaphor for this discord. It begs us to pause and reconsider the value of harmony, not as a soft concept, but as a necessary principle for sustainable existence. It challenges us to listen, not for a literal gong, but for the ways we might realign our own lives and societies with the deeper, subtler rhythms we have long since forgotten how to hear. Rising from the sun-baked plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the great ziggurats of Mesopotamia were not silent monuments of stone and baked brick. They were living, breathing instruments of cosmic communication, their summits adorned with bells of polished bronze and copper that hung in the open air. To the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians who built these towering stairways to heaven, the gentle, deliberate chime of these bells was not merely a pleasant sound. It was the voice of humanity projected into the divine realm, a resonant offering meant to capture the attention of powerful, often capricious gods like Enlil, the lord of wind and storm, or Marduk, the patron deity of Babylon and king of the gods. In a universe they believed was constantly threatened by the forces of primordial chaos, represented by the goddess Tiamat and her monstrous horde, these carefully tuned frequencies were a vital technology for maintaining the fragile order of creation itself. The bell's chime was a sonic bulwark against the ever-lurking void. This practice was rooted in a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos as an interconnected harmonic system. Mesopotamian astronomer priests, who meticulously charted the movements of the planets and stars from their temple observatories, developed a profound belief in celestial harmony. They perceived a direct correlation between the motions of the heavenly bodies and the events on Earth. Each planet in Nana for Venus, Nergal for Mars, was thought to possess its own unique influence and, crucially, its own resonant frequency. The great bells that hung from the ziggurats were not cast randomly. Cuneiform tablets, like those found in the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, provide intricate details on their construction, specifying precise ratios of metals and dimensions that would allow the finished bell to vibrate in sympathy with a specific celestial body. A bell tuned to the frequency of the sun god Shamash would be used in rituals for justice and law, while one attuned to the goddess Ishtar might be chimed to promote fertility and love. The sound was a deliberate act of tuning the earthly realm to the perceived harmony of the heavens. These rituals were the heartbeat of Mesopotamian society, and the chiming of the bells was their essential pulse. During the Grand New Year festival, the Akitu, a procession of priests would ascend the ziggurate's steep staircases, chanting specific hymns and ringing a sequence of bells in a precise, sacred order. This sonic ritual was believed to reenact the original cosmic battle where the god Marduk defeated the chaos monster Tiamat and used her body to form the ordered world. Each chime was a reaffirmation of that victory, a vibrational reinforcement of the cosmic order that prevented the world from sliding back into the formless waters of chaos. Similarly, to ensure the annual flooding of the rivers, the lifeblood of their agriculture, priests would perform ceremonies where the ringing of water-tuned bells was thought to encourage the benevolence of the god Enki, the lord of the fresh waters and wisdom, guaranteeing the silt-rich waters would nourish their fields. One particularly vivid account, pieced together from fragmentary tablets, tells of a high priest in the city of Nippur, the cult center of the god Enlil. A terrifying storm sent by Enlil himself in a fit of rage was bearing down on the city, threatening to destroy the harvest and flood the homes of the people. Instead of cowering, the priest ascended the ziggurat to the shrine at its peak. As the winds howled and lightning cracked across the sky, he did not simply pray for mercy. He began a forceful, rhythmic chant, striking a specific bronze bell with a sacred hammer in time with his incantation. The legend claims that his voice, amplified by the resonant tone of the bell, did not plead with the god but instead mimicked the very frequency of calm, clear skies, creating a bubble of harmonic order within the storm's chaos. The tale concludes with the storm splitting around the city, the winds dying down as if soothed by the sound, and the rains watering the fields without causing destruction. The priest's act was seen not as magic, but as advanced spiritual acoustics, using sound to correct a dissonance in the relationship between the people and their powerful, volatile god. This profound and intricate dialogue between humanity and the divine, conducted through the medium of resonant bronze, could not survive the relentless march of empires. With the successive falls of the great Mesopotamian powers, first to the Persians, then to the Greeks under Alexander, and finally to the Romans and Parthians, the priestly lineages that guarded the secrets of these sacred frequencies were dispersed or extinguished. The ziggurats were abandoned to the sand, and their precious bells were melted down for weapons or coinage. The cuneiform script that held the instructions for their tuning became an unreadable mystery, a forgotten language etched on crumbling clay. The knowledge didn't just fade, it was systematically erased by conquering cultures with different gods and different ways of speaking to them. The bells fell completely silent, and with them, a unique channel of communication was severed, representing a catastrophic break in a dialogue that had lasted for millennia. The absence of their chime today is a haunting reminder of a lost intimacy with the cosmos. We have replaced their purpose with alarms and notifications, sounds that serve human schedules rather than cosmic balance. The silence of the celestial bells speaks to the terrifying fragility of sacred traditions. An entire worldview, a complete system for understanding and interacting with the universe through disciplined, beautiful sound, can be utterly extinguished within a few generations, leaving behind only whispers in the archaeological record. It underscores a sobering truth that our connection to the divine or to the deeper order of the universe is not a given. It is a practice, a craft, a delicate thread of knowledge that must be actively maintained and passed down, or it will vanish into the desert wind, leaving us in a world that feels and sounds profoundly alone. Imagine a sound so perfect, so inherently powerful, that it was not invented by the human mind, but discovered by it, like a physicist uncovering a fundamental law of the universe. This is the nature of the Vedic mantra. According to the ancient Rig Veda, the oldest of the Hindu scriptures, these sacred chants were not composed by poets or priests. They were shruti, that which is heard. In states of profound, transcendent meditation, the rishis or seers perceived these sounds as vibrations emanating from the very fabric of reality itself. They were not creating music, they were tuning into the cosmic broadcast, listening to the universe's own language and transcribing it into human utterance. The most famous of these, the Gayatri Mantra, is not a prayer in the sense of a request. It is a powerful sonic formula, an invocation of the sun's illuminating power designed to awaken that same radiant wisdom within the consciousness of the one who chants it. It is the structured sound of enlightenment itself. The belief in the tangible power of these mantras was absolute and multifaceted. When uttered with perfect precision, the correct pronunciation, rhythm, tone, and mental focus, a mantra was thought to be a tool for direct reality manipulation. Specific chants from the Atharvaveda were used as bhashoja, or healing spells, to cure diseases by restoring the body's vibrational harmony. Others, found across the texts, were believed to bring rain, ensure victory in battle, attract prosperity, or grant protection from malevolent forces. But the highest purpose was always spiritual. The ultimate goal of mantra repetition, or japa, was to use the sound as a vehicle to cross the ocean of illusion, to quiet the restless mind, and to allow the individual soul to resonate in unison with the universal soul, achieving a state of liberation known as moksha. The sound was both the path and the destination. This immense power came with an immense responsibility, the sacred duty of preservation. For over 3,000 years, the Vedas were transmitted exclusively through an oral tradition of breathtaking complexity and accuracy. Vedic schools, known as Gatikas, developed a sophisticated system of recitation that acted as a built-in error-checking mechanism. Students didn't just learn the hymns, they mastered 11 different ways of chanting them, including Jotapata, where words are chanted forward and then backward, and Ganapatha, a highly complex knitted recitation. This wasn't for artistic flourish, it was a fail-safe. If a single syllable was out of place in one method, it would be immediately caught by the dissonance it created in another. The Guru-Shishya Parampara, the teacher-disciple lineage, was a sacred chain of custody for these sonic secrets, ensuring that the vibrational purity of the mantra, believed to be the very source of its power, remained utterly uncorrupted from one generation to the next. The sound itself was a living entity, and these scholars were its guardians. Even in our modern scientific age, practitioners continue to report profound effects from this ancient practice. Neurologists note that the rhythmic repetition of a mantra can calm the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and induce states of deep relaxation and heightened focus. Veteran meditators describe experiences far beyond simple stress relief. They speak of palpable vibrational sensations, a sense of the entire body humming like a tuning fork, and moments of sudden, inexplicable insight that feel downloaded from a source outside themselves. One long-time practitioner of transcendental meditation shared that during a deep session of Gayatri mantra chanting, she didn't just feel calm, she experienced a visceral sensation of light flooding her mind, followed by a crystalline clarity on a personal problem that had troubled her for months, as if the sound had literally shaken the answer loose. For her, the mantra was not a superstition but a reliable technology for accessing deeper layers of consciousness. This unbroken sonic river, however, began to slow and fragment with the rise of urbanization and the shift from an oral to a literate culture. As ancient Vedic schools declined and people moved to bustling cities, the intimate, demanding guru-disciple relationship became harder to maintain. The invention of the printing press was a final, decisive blow. The Vedas were transcribed into books. While this democratized access to the knowledge, it fundamentally altered the relationship with the sound. The focus shifted from the precise, felt vibration of the mantra to its meaning as a written text. People began to read and analyze the Vedas as literature or philosophy, dissecting them intellectually rather than experiencing them vibrationally. The living, breathing, transformative power of the uttered sound was largely lost, preserved only in small, traditional communities. The sacred waveform was flattened into a sentence on a page. This transition from a lived, resonant experience to a silent, textual study represents a profound and widespread cultural shift. It highlights a collective move away from auditory spirituality, a world view where truth is heard, felt, and vibrated, and toward a visual, intellectual spirituality where truth is read, analyzed, and understood. We traded the immersive, experiential power of the chant for the convenience and clarity of the written word, gaining intellectual comprehension at the potential cost of transcendental experience. The fading resonance of the Vedic chants is a powerful symbol of this amnesia, a quiet reminder that some forms of knowledge cannot be fully captured in ink and paper, but must be breathed into life through the human voice, passed from one willing heart to another as a living sound. From the sacred chants of the Vedas, we turn now to a sound that needed no human voice to give it power, a solitary, piercing cry that announced not just a life, but the very concept of life renewed. Across the ancient world, in cultures separated by vast oceans and unbreachable deserts, a singular, magnificent myth took flight, the phoenix. This legendary bird, cloaked in flames and mystery, was more than a symbol of resilience. It was the living embodiment of cyclical rebirth. And its most potent moment was not its spectacular death in a pyre of its own making, but the sound it made as it emerged anew, a sharp, clarion cry that echoed across the cosmos, heralding the end of one age and the undeniable dawn of another. This was not a song of mourning, but a sonic declaration that destruction was merely the prelude to creation. The myth manifested in stunningly similar forms across the globe, and in each, the bird's cry was intrinsically linked to the most reliable cycle known to humanity, the journey of the sun. In Egypt, it was the Bennu bird, a heron-like deity who was the Ba, or soul, of the sun god Ra. As the sun sank each evening, seemingly consumed by darkness, the Bennu was said to let out a lonely cry, a mournful note that acknowledged the day's death. But at dawn, as the sun burst triumphantly over the horizon, the Bennu's cry transformed into one of triumphant renewal, a sound that vibrated with the promise of resurrection. For the Greeks who adopted the myth and named it the phoenix, the connection was even more explicit. The bird was said to live for 500 years, and when its time drew near, it would fly to Heliopolis, the city of the sun. There, it would build a nest of sacred spices like frankincense and myrrh, which would then be ignited by the heat of the sun itself. From the crackling flames, a new, young phoenix would rise, and its first act was to let out a cry so pure and powerful it was said to stop all other birds in the sky mid-song, a sonic announcement of its own glorious return. This cry was believed to be more than just a biological vocalization. It was a frequency imbued with cosmic power. Legends from various traditions suggest that simply hearing this sound could bestow incredible gifts upon a mortal. In some Chinese versions of the myth, the Feng Huang, a creature often conflated with the phoenix, possessed a cry of such perfect harmony that a ruler who heard it was granted the mandate of heaven, ensuring a long and prosperous reign. In Persian tales, the sound of the Huma bird's cry echoing over one's head was an immediate omen that one would become a king. For mystics and seekers, the cry represented something even greater, the sound of ultimate wisdom, a vibrational key that could unlock the secrets of immortality itself. To hear it was to be momentarily plugged into the fundamental frequency of renewal that underpins the entire universe, a sonic glimpse behind the curtain of life and death. This belief in its transformative power captivated one group above all others, the alchemists. For these proto-scientists, the phoenix was not just a myth, it was the ultimate symbol of their magnum opus, the great work of transmuting base lead into perfect gold, which was itself a metaphor for the transmutation of the mortal soul into an immortal, enlightened state. They became obsessed with replicating the conditions of the phoenix's rebirth within their own laboratories. The fiery furnace, the alembic, the precise combination of materials, all were an attempt to create an artificial nest. But their most profound pursuit was sonic. They believed that a specific combination of notes, a certain resonant frequency produced by striking a particular glass vessel or chanting a specific syllable at the exact moment of chemical transformation, could act as a surrogate for the phoenix's cry. This sound, they theorized, would be the catalyst that would complete the transmutation, vibrating the matter at just the right frequency to perfect it. Their quest was to find the exact pitch of resurrection. The rise of the scientific revolution, however, slowly extinguished this fiery, sonic mythology. Biology and geology provided mechanical, non-magical explanations for natural cycles. The regular return of spring, the life cycle of a forest after a fire, the very process of death and decay, all were mapped onto charts of cause and effect, stripped of their mystical resonance. The phoenix did not disappear, but it was thoroughly domesticated. Its cry was silenced, and the magnificent bird was reduced to a mere metaphor for resilience, a pretty symbol for an insurance company or a motivational poster. Its story was still told, but the magic was drained from it. We kept the image of the beautiful bird rising from the flames, but we lost the sound that gave that image its soul-shaking power. This shift represents a profound narrowing of our perception. Where our ancestors heard in the phoenix's cry a cosmic event, a sonic marker of a universe that regularly dies and is reborn on a grand spiritual scale, we now see only a silent biological process. Rebirth, to the modern mind, is something that happens quietly in an ecosystem or anonymously in a cellular life cycle. It has lost its majesty, its drama, its audible fanfare. The silencing of the phoenix's cry is therefore a symbol of a much deeper silence, our collective deafness to the miraculous in the mundane. We have explained the mechanism of the sunrise, but in doing so, we may have stopped hearing the triumphant cry that once announced it as a daily victory over darkness, a sound that reminds us that every ending carries within it the undeniable and often beautiful seed of a new beginning. Perched atop the shimmering Bifrost Bridge, the ever-vigilant watchman of the gods strains his eyes and ears against the gathering gloom. Heimdallr, the whitest of the Aesir, needs no sleep, his senses so acute he can hear the grass growing on the earth and the wool thickening on the sheep. But he listens for one sound above all others, the footfall of his ancient enemy, the trickster Loki, and beside him, waiting for the moment all of creation dreads, hangs the instrument of ultimate prophecy, the Yggdrasil horn. This is no ordinary war horn, forged in the deep well of wisdom itself and raised to the lips of its divine guardian. Its blast will not signal the start of a battle, but the end of everything. This is the sound of the world's final alarm clock, a resonant call that cannot be ignored, a vibration that will shake the very roots of Yggdrasil and summon every being, from the highest god in Asgard to the lowest soul in Helheim, to their preordained destiny. The ancient verses of the poetic Edda, specifically the Völuspá, paint a terrifying and awe-inspiring sonic picture of this moment. The poem, spoken by a seeress who remembers the beginning of time, describes the event with chilling clarity. She speaks of the old watchman who blows the Yggdrasil horn and how its call is taken up by another horn, one blown by a giantess. The sound is described as a roaring, a howling, a note of such profound and terrible power that it transcends mere noise and becomes a physical force. It doesn't just travel through the air, it vibrates through the fabric of the 9 realms, cracking the foundations of mountains and churning the waters of the oceans. In that single, catastrophic blast, time itself seems to fracture. The bonds of oath and kinship, the very structures that hold society and the cosmos together, are shown to be fragile illusions. The horn's call is the trigger that unleashes the wolf from his chains, the serpent from the sea, and the legions of the dead from their graves. It is the starting pistol for Ragnarök. For the Vikings who listened to these sagas in their smoky mead halls, this was not a distant fantasy. It was a deeply ingrained part of their worldview, a reminder of the fragile order maintained by the gods and the ever-present threat of chaos lurking just beyond the firelight. But the power of the horn blast was not only a herald of doom, it was also a tool to be harnessed in the present. Viking warriors and chieftains used horns called lure in their own rituals and daily life. The blast of a horn could summon a thing, their governing assembly, calling free men to law and judgment. On the battlefield, specific horn signals could direct the flow of combat, a practice that required immense discipline and trust. More esoterically, the sound was believed to have apotropaic qualities, the power to ward off evil spirits. A sharp blast from a horn might be used to hallow a new piece of land, to bless a ship before its launch, or to protect a household from malevolent wights. In these practices, we see humanity's attempt to borrow a tiny fragment of Heimdallr's power, to use resonant sound as a shield against the encroaching darkness, a small, hopeful echo against the coming silence. This rich, complex tapestry of meaning, woven from threads of destiny, duty, and protection, could not survive the cultural earthquake of Christianization. As the cross slowly replaced the hammer across Scandinavia, the old gods were systematically demonized or transformed into fairy tale figures. Heimdallr, the shining sentinel, was recast as a mere giant or a forgotten king. The Yggdrasil horn, once the most fearsome instrument in the cosmos, lost its esoteric weight. It was no longer the horn that would announce the twilight of the gods. It became a curious artifact, a plot device in the old stories their grandparents told, its terrifying significance sanded down into a safe, mythological detail. The sound it was meant to produce faded from a dreaded certainty into a silent metaphor. The profound silence of the unblown Yggdrasil horn in our modern world is a powerful symbol of a much broader disconnection. We have largely lost our sense of an ending. Our culture is consumed with narratives of progress, expansion, and endless growth, often willfully ignoring the looming consequences of our actions on the planet and within our societies. Apocalypse has been relegated to the movie screen, a spectacle of CGI explosions and zombie hordes that we consume for entertainment before walking out into the unchanged light of day. It is a fantasy, a resonant warning reduced to a thrilling but ultimately empty noise. We have forgotten how to listen for the real Yggdrasil horn, the scientific data on climate change that reads like a prophecy, the geopolitical tensions that simmer like the feud between the Aesir and the Jötnar, the social fractures that feel like the breaking of bonds foretold in the Eddas. The horn's silence today is not a sign of safety, but a symptom of our collective deafness. It challenges us to recover a sense of sacred urgency, to remember that some calls are not meant to be heard as stories, but as wake-up calls that demand a response, a change of heart, and a preparation for the battles, both literal and metaphorical, that define any true end of an age. Now we journey to the banks of the Nile, to a scene of profound despair that would birth one of humanity's most enduring myths. The god King Osiris, betrayed and murdered by his brother Set, lies dismembered, his body parts scattered across the length of Egypt to prevent any hope of return. His wife and sister, the goddess Isis, is consumed by a grief so vast it seems to darken the sun itself. But her response is not silent resignation. From the depths of her sorrow, she unleashes a sound, a raw, piercing lamentation of such overwhelming power that it does not just express sadness, it actively defies the finality of death itself. This is not a passive cry, but an active force. Her wails, woven with words of potent magic and desperate love, become a divine summons, calling the scattered pieces of her husband back together, vibrating with a frequency that can literally reassemble form from chaos and coax the spirit back into its vessel. In this moment, sound is revealed not as an expression of loss, but as the very instrument of restoration. This transformative power of ritualized grief was not confined to myth. It was institutionalized at the very heart of Egyptian society for millennia. The most sacred text for any Egyptian hoping to navigate the afterlife, the Book of the Dead, is filled with specific chants and lamentations directly modeled on the cries of Isis. One spell meant to be uttered by the grieving family explicitly says, "O Isis, O Nephthys, go, find Osiris, may you prevent his decay, may you stop his corruption." The mourners weren't just remembering a story, they were reenacting it, channeling the divine sisters Isis and Nephthys, and using the same sonic formulas they believed could reassemble a god. The power was in the precise utterance, the correct vowels, the specific rhythm, the emotional intensity which transformed human grief into a cosmic tool, a vibrational key that could unlock the doors of the underworld for their own departed loved ones. This sacred duty often fell to specialized priestesses, known as the kites of Isis or the drivers of grief. These women were highly trained in the art of ritual lamentation. Their performances during funerals were not spontaneous outpourings of emotion. They were carefully choreographed sonic rituals. They would rhythmically beat their breasts, tear their hair, and chant in high, wavering tones that were believed to mimic the cries of the divine sisters. Their role was to act as a conduit, to channel the raw, world-altering sorrow of the goddess into the community, providing a structured vessel for the overwhelming and chaotic emotions of the bereaved. By giving collective grief a specific sound and a sacred purpose, these lamentations did more than honor the dead. They healed the living, binding the community together through a shared, resonant experience of loss and the hopeful promise of renewal. We can imagine the scene at a pharaoh's funeral, the air thick with incense, the body prepared with amulets and spells, the procession of priests. But the most haunting element would be the sound, the coordinated, piercing wails of the mourners, a wall of sorrowful sound rising to the heavens, intended to tear a hole in the fabric of reality and ensure the king's safe passage and transformation into an Ak, a glorified spirit. This sonic practice provided a crucial cultural function. It created a sanctioned public space for the expression of the most difficult human emotion, transforming private, isolating grief into a communal, purposeful act that reaffirmed the cosmic order and the promise of life after death. The sound itself was the medicine for the soul's deepest wound. Yet, where is that sound today? The decline of the ancient Egyptian religion, accelerated by the rise of Christianity and later Islam, gradually stripped these practices of their original, potent meaning. The lamentations of Isis were sanitized and sentimentalized, transformed from a potent magical technology into a silent symbol of maternal grief, a pretty motif carved on tomb walls for tourists to photograph. The acoustic efficacy, the belief that the sound itself could enact change in the unseen world, was lost, leaving behind only the aesthetic shell of the ritual. The professional mourners of later cultures sometimes retained the form, but the sacred, transformative intention behind the wail had largely vanished, becoming a performance rather than a profound spiritual act. This silencing echoes far beyond the sands of Egypt. In our modern, largely secular Western culture, we have largely lost the art of communal, sonic mourning. Grief has become a privatized, often silent, and frequently medicalized experience. We are encouraged to process our loss quietly, in therapy offices or alone, to avoid making others uncomfortable with our pain. The raw, unvarnished sound of anguish is seen as a social disruption, something to be contained and hushed. We lack the shared rituals, the prescribed chants, the collective wails that once gave a channel and a purpose to our deepest sorrow. The silence that replaced the lament of Isis points to a profound loss, the loss of a tool for healing collective trauma through shared, resonant sound. We are left to grieve in quiet isolation, without the ancient, vibrational assurance that our cries might not just express our pain, but actively help to mend the very world that has been broken by loss. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, nestled between towering cliffs and a breathtaking valley, stood the one place in the ancient world where the veil between the human and the divine was believed to be tissue-thin. This was the sanctuary of Delphi, and at its heart lay a fissure in the earth, a crack in the living rock from which issued not just strange, intoxicating vapors, but a palpable, humming energy. Pilgrims, kings, and generals from across the known world would make the arduous journey here, not for a silent prayer, but to hear a sound. The rasping, rhythmic, often delirious utterances of the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo. Her voice, distorted by trance and the intoxicating gases she inhaled, was not considered her own. It was the voice of the god himself, a distorted harmonic channeled through a human vessel, offering cryptic guidance that would literally change the course of history. This was not mere speech, it was the hum of prophecy itself, a resonant frequency believed to carry the very will of the cosmos. The process was a meticulously orchestrated ritual of vibration. On specific days each month, the Pythia, always a local woman of good character chosen for her receptivity, would undergo elaborate purification rites. She would bathe in the sacred Castalian spring, drink from the Cassotes stream, and then descend into the temple's inner chamber, the Aditon. There, she would seat herself on a tall, three-legged tripod placed directly over the geological chasm. As the sweet-smelling, ethylene-rich vapors now confirmed by geological studies rose from the crack, she would enter an ecstatic state. Her breathing would become heavy, her body might convulse, and her head would loll. The attending priests would then pose the questions brought by the anxious supplicants waiting outside. Her responses were not clear sentences, but a stream of guttural sounds, disjointed words, and haunting moans. The priests, who served as the sonic interpreters, would then take these raw, resonant vibrations and shape them into the famous, ambiguous hexameter verses that were delivered to the seeker. The sound was the raw divine data. The priests provided the translation. This bizarre and powerful practice forced the greatest minds of antiquity to grapple with a fundamental question: was this truly the voice of a god or something else entirely? The philosopher Plato, while deeply respectful of Delphi's role in society, proposed a more psychological explanation. He suggested that the Pythia, and indeed all true poets and prophets, operated through a form of divine madness, a mania that allowed the rational mind to be bypassed so that a deeper, purer truth could emerge from the soul. For him, the vapors and the chanting were not summoning an external god, but were a technology for unlocking a divine spark already present within the human being. The hum was not Apollo speaking through her, but the sound of her own soul vibrating at a higher, more receptive frequency, tapping into the universal harmony. He debated this with others who insisted on a more literal, supernatural interpretation, creating a vibrant intellectual controversy about the very source of truth and inspiration. The authority of this resonant hum was so absolute that it directly shaped the fate of nations. Perhaps the most famous example is the consultation by King Croesus of Lydia, renowned as the wealthiest man in the world. Before launching a war against the rising Persian Empire, he sent magnificent gifts to Delphi and asked if he should attack. The oracle's reply was classic in its ambiguity. If Croesus attacked the Persians, he would destroy a great empire. Interpreting this as a sure sign of victory, Croesus went to war only to be decisively defeated. It was his own empire that was destroyed. The oracle was right, but the sound had been misinterpreted. In another instance, the Athenians, facing a seemingly unstoppable invasion by the Persians under Xerxes, were told to trust their wooden walls. The debate raged. Did this mean to retreat behind the city's actual walls, or to trust their navy, their wooden ships? Themistocles argued for the latter, and his interpretation led to the glorious naval victory at Salamis, saving Greek civilization. The hum of the oracle was a weapon as powerful as any army, a sound that could save or doom thousands based on its enigmatic resonance. This 1,000-year-old conversation between humanity and the divine through the medium of a trembling human voice was brought to an abrupt and final end by the rise of Christianity. The newly empowered church, intent on consolidating its spiritual authority, systematically demonized all pagan practices. Emperor Theodosius I, in a series of edicts in the late 4th century, ordered the closure of all pagan temples and the suppression of their rituals. The sanctuary at Delphi was sacked, its treasures looted, and the sacred chasm was sealed, perhaps with rubble or lead, forever stifling the vapors and silencing the Pythia. The hum of prophecy was not allowed to fade. It was violently suffocated, condemned as the work of demons deceiving mankind. The physical conduit was destroyed, and the voice was severed. This created a profound vacuum in the human quest for guidance. For centuries, the people of the Mediterranean world had relied on this external, resonant intermediary to access wisdom that surpassed human understanding. With Delphi silencing, that external channel was officially closed. The responsibility for hearing the divine was internalized. Guidance was no longer to be found in a priestess's rasping breath on a mountainside, but in silent prayer, in the internal contemplation of scripture, and in the still, small voice of individual conscience. It was a monumental shift from seeking truth as a sound to be heard from without, to seeking truth as an intuition to be listened for within. This historical shift holds up a mirror to our own modern search for answers. Today, we have replaced the Pythia with a million digital oracles, algorithmic feeds, online gurus, and endless streams of data that promise guidance and prediction. We outsource our intuition to reviews, analytics, and automated decision-making tools. The hum of the oracle has been replaced by the buzz of the server farm. The silence left by the sealed chasm at Delphi asks us a critical question. In our quest for certainty, have we simply found new intermediaries, new priests to interpret a new kind of cryptic data for us? The challenge then and now remains the same, not just to find a source of answers, but to cultivate the wisdom to interpret the resonance correctly, and to remember that the most profound guidance often requires us to be still, to listen deeply, and to ultimately trust the discernment that comes from within. Deep within the mist-shrouded legends of Britain, a sword was more than a weapon. It was a verdict, a living symbol of a king's very right to rule. This was Excalibur, and its power was not only in its unbreakable blade or its gleaming scabbard, but in its voice. When drawn from its sheath, it did not slide out silently. It rang, a single, clear, resonant tone that cut through the chaos of battle or the tension of a court, a sound that was instantly recognized by all who heard it as the audible seal of divine approval. This ring was the sound of sovereignty itself, a vibration that confirmed Arthur Pendragon was no mere warlord, but the true High King, chosen by heaven and inextricably bound to the health and vitality of the land he governed. In a world where legitimacy was often contested by the sword, Excalibur's ring was the one sound that could end all arguments before a single blow was struck. This concept of a weapon possessing a voice, of metal having a moral compass, finds its deep roots in the older Celtic traditions that predate the Arthurian romances. The Irish had the Lia Fail, the stone of destiny, which would cry out under the feet of the true king. The Welsh had the story of the sword Dynwen, which would burst into flame when wielded by a noble hand. Weapons and talismans were not inert objects. They were participants in the drama, imbued with consciousness and a connection to the other world. They were the physical instruments through which the land itself could express its approval or disapproval of a ruler. A king was not just a political leader, he was the spouse of the sovereignty goddess, a living embodiment of the realm's fortune. Excalibur's ring was the wedding band in this sacred union, the sonic proof that the bond was true and the kingdom would therefore flourish. We see this power manifest in the tales not as a mere formality, but as an active, dynamic force. In the heat of a desperate battle against invading Saxons or rival kings, the sound of Excalibur being drawn would act like a shockwave of courage through Arthur's knights. Their fatigue would vanish, their doubt would turn to resolve, and they would fight with the strength of 10 men, heartened by the audible reminder that destiny itself was fighting on their side. Conversely, the ring could serve as a warning. In some lesser-known variants of the myth, the sword's tone would change, becoming a duller, more ominous thrum when treachery was near, or when Arthur himself was contemplating an action that would break his sacred oath to the Round Table. It was a conscience made audible, a harmonic check on the king's power that kept him aligned with the path of justice. This sonic majesty was the very lifeblood of the bardic tradition. It wasn't enough for a poet to describe the sword's beauty, he had to capture its sound. The most skilled bards would use complex alliteration, rhythm, and vocal techniques to mimic the legendary ring in their recitations. Their performance was an act of sonic magic, a way to make their audience not just hear about the sound, but to feel its resonance in their very bones. To hear a bard sing of Excalibur's clear tone was to participate in the reaffirmation of a golden age, to remember a time when right rule was not a matter of political maneuvering, but a fact as clear and undeniable as a bell ringing across the land. The story was kept alive not just by the plot, but by the evocative power of its central sound. The slow, inexorable shift from monarchy to more democratic forms of government, however, fundamentally changed our relationship with these resonant symbols. The idea that a single, divinely chosen individual could embody the will of an entire nation began to feel like an archaic superstition. The concept of the king's health being directly tied to the land's fertility became a poetic metaphor rather than a political reality. As a result, Excalibur was gradually stripped of its profound symbolic power. It was pulled from the stone of sacred kingship and placed on the shelf of literature, becoming a fantastical plot device in a children's story or a shiny prop in a Hollywood film. Its ring became a special effect, a cool sound to add drama to a scene, but utterly divorced from its original meaning as the sound of cosmic legitimacy. This leaves us in our modern age with a peculiar and telling silence. The ring of Excalibur has faded, but our desperate search for legitimacy has not. It has simply become more frantic and diffuse. We now seek validation in a cacophony of external noise, the relentless ping of social media likes, the roar of crowd approval at a rally, the glowing metrics of a viral post, the weight of professional titles and material acquisitions. We are surrounded by more sound than any generation in history, yet we are farther than ever from that single, clear, undeniable tone that once cut through everything and simply said, "This is right. This is true." We have traded the resonant clarity of the sword's ring for the overwhelming, confusing din of the crowd, forever searching for a confirmation of our worth in the noise rather than cultivating the quiet integrity that would make such external validation unnecessary. The silence of Excalibur's ring, then, is not just about the loss of a king. It is about the loss of a certain kind of certainty, a harmonic truth we still ache for in the depths of our noisy souls. In the deep oak groves of ancient Gaul and Britain, beneath a canopy of whispering leaves, the air itself was considered a living membrane, a medium through which a trained voice could converse with the very soul of the world. The Druids, the revered philosopher-priests of the Celtic world, were masters of this sonic art. Their power was not drawn from stone temples or written texts, but from the resonant energy of the natural world, which they believed could be accessed and influenced through the disciplined use of specific chants and vocalizations. These were not songs of worship in the way we might understand them. They were functional, vibrational tools. A carefully modulated chant was thought to be a key that could unlock the latent consciousness of an ancient tree, calm a stampeding herd of deer, or coax a hidden spring to reveal itself from beneath the earth. It was a technology of intimacy, a belief that humanity was not separate from nature, but a vocal participant in a continuous harmonic dialogue. This practice was deeply rooted in a calendar governed by the sky. The great fire festivals of Imbolc, Beltane, Lughnasadh, and Samhain were not just social gatherings, they were acoustic events of profound importance. But it was during the solstices and equinoxes, those precise moments of celestial balance, that the Druidic chants were believed to be most potent, as the sun appeared to stand still at the summer solstice, or as day and night achieved perfect equilibrium at the spring equinox. The Druids would gather at sacred alignments like Stonehenge or in secluded forest clearings. Their chanting was an act of cosmic tuning, an attempt to harmonize the rhythm of human community with the grand, slow heartbeat of the earth and the precise mathematical dance of the heavens. They sought to create a resonant bridge between the microcosm of the tribe and the macrocosm of the universe, ensuring that the fertility of the land, the success of the hunt, and the wisdom of the people remained in sync with the turning wheel of the stars. Our understanding of these practices comes to us through two very different and often conflicting lenses: the evocative but fragmented tales of Irish mythology and the observational yet biased accounts of Roman invaders. The Irish myths, committed to writing centuries later by Christian monks, still retain echoes of this older world. They speak of the Druid Cathbad, whose chants could bind a warrior with Jisa or magical prohibitions, and of the powerful satirists whose sharp, rhythmic verses could literally raise boils on the face of an unjust king. The power of the word, the glam disin, was a tangible force. The Roman writers, like Julius Caesar in his Gallic Wars and Pliny the Elder, provide a more external view, often painting the Druids as barbaric mystics, but nonetheless confirming their immense social authority. Pliny describes a bizarre ritual where Druids, clad in white robes, would use a golden sickle to cut mistletoe from a sacred oak during a specific phase of the moon, all while chanting specific prayers he could not comprehend. He dismissed it as superstition, but his account inadvertently reveals a practice of meticulous sonic and celestial timing, where sound, botany, and astronomy were woven into a single, coherent ritual. Centuries of silence followed the Roman conquest and the later spread of Christianity, which actively suppressed the old pagan ways. The sacred groves were cut down, the oral traditions were broken, and the specific frequencies of the chants were lost to the wind. But the longing for that connection never entirely died. In the modern era, a movement of Druidic revivalism has taken root, with individuals and groups attempting to reconnect with this lost wisdom. They study the myths, the archaeology, and the surviving folk traditions of the Celtic fringe, piecing together a new practice. A modern druid might stand before an ancient yew tree, not with a prescribed chant from an ancient handbook, but with a willingness to listen first, to the sound of the wind through its branches, the creak of its old wood, the chatter of birds in its boughs. From that place of deep listening, they might offer a simple, heartfelt tone, a vocalization that emerges as a response rather than a command, an attempt to reopen a conversation that was severed long ago, not to replicate the past, but to rediscover its principle of resonant relationship. This conscious effort at reconnection throws our own modern reality into stark relief. The chants of the Druids faded not just because of religious persecution, but because of a fundamental shift in how humanity perceives itself in relation to the natural world. We moved from a participatory worldview where we spoke with the forest to an extractive one where we speak about the forest as a resource. Urbanization built a wall of concrete and noise between us and the subtle frequencies of the wild. The sonic link was severed, and in its place we often experience nature as a silent picture, a backdrop for our activities, or worse, as a threatening void to be controlled and dominated. The absence of the Druidic chant is a symptom of this profound ecological and spiritual disconnection, a loss of the ear and the voice that once knew how to listen for and respond to the music of the living world. This historical silence now presents us with a pressing invitation, not to become druids, but to learn from their core philosophy. It urges a reattunement, a conscious effort to lower the volume of our manufactured world and sharpen our auditory awareness. This might begin simply, noticing the specific pitch of different bird calls, distinguishing the sound of wind in pine needles from wind in autumn leaves, or feeling the deep, subsonic rumble of a distant thunderstorm not as a threat, but as a powerful vibration in the body. It is about recognizing that the earth is not a silent resource, but a symphony of frequencies, from the slow grind of tectonic plates to the high-frequency buzz of insect wings of which we are a part. The lost chants of the Druids challenge us to move beyond just looking at nature and to remember how to listen to it, to find our voice within its chorus once more, and to restore a dialogue that is essential not just for the soul of the planet, but for our own. In the profound stillness of a Zen meditation hall, where the air is thick with the collective focus of practitioners, there is one sound that owns the silence completely: the deep, resonant, all-encompassing strike of a gong. This is not an instrument for music or ceremony in the ordinary sense. In Buddhist practice, particularly in the Zen tradition, the gong's vibration is a direct transmission, a sonic embodiment of sudden awakening. Its purpose is not to mark the beginning or end of a session, but to shatter the session itself. The moment the mallet strikes, the sound that erupts is designed to cut through the intricate web of a meditator's thoughts, their anxieties, their very sense of self, like a lightning bolt illuminating the dark landscape of the mind for one brilliant, transformative instant. It is the sound of reality itself, breaking through the illusion. This moment is intimately connected to the foundational experience of the tradition's founder. The story of the Buddha's enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree is often told as a silent, internal victory over the demon Mara. But some schools, especially those emphasizing direct transmission, speak of it as a moment of profound vibrational understanding. It's said that in the moment of his awakening, Siddhartha Gautama didn't just see the truth, he became the truth, and the entire universe resonated in confirmation. The strike of the meditation gong is an attempt to recreate that singular, cosmic vibration in a controlled setting, to offer practitioners a fleeting taste of that same fundamental shift in perception. It is a tool to shake the consciousness out of its habitual grooves and into a direct, unmediated experience of the present moment, free from conceptual thinking. This philosophy is vividly illustrated in the enigmatic teaching stories known as koans. While not always explicitly about sound, many point to this same abrupt, disruptive quality. The most famous might be the koan of a master holding up a flower and simply smiling, a silent gesture that triggered enlightenment in his disciple. The gong operates on the same principle but through the auditory sense. It is a physical, undeniable event that happens now, bypassing the intellect entirely. A Zen master might use it strategically during an intense retreat or session, striking it at an unexpected moment when a student seems particularly stuck or ripe for a breakthrough. The sound isn't meant to be analyzed, it's meant to be experienced so fully that the experiencer disappears, leaving only the experience. It is the auditory equivalent of a finger pointing at the moon, demanding one look at the celestial body and not at the digit doing the pointing. There are countless anecdotes of masters using this tool with surgical precision. The renowned Hakuin Akaku, one of the most influential figures in Japanese Zen, was known for his fierce and unconventional methods. He would sometimes use sudden, shocking sounds, a shout, a clap, or the strike of a gong, to jolt his students out of their intellectual complacency. The goal was satori, a sudden flash of intuitive insight, and the sound was the trigger. In one story, a monk was deeply struggling with a koan, his mind tangled in logical knots. As he sat in the meditation hall, his frustration mounting, Hakuin silently approached the large gong and struck it with immense force. The story says the monk didn't just hear the sound, he was physically and mentally overwhelmed by its totality. In that shocking, vibratory moment, his conceptual mind short-circuited, and the koan resolved itself not through an answer, but through a profound, wordless understanding. The gong didn't provide a solution, it dissolved the problem. The preservation of this acoustic practice is a sacred duty within monasteries. The act of striking the gong itself is a disciplined art form known as kinhin, not to be confused with walking meditation. It requires a specific technique, a precise strike point, and a mindful follow-through to allow the full spectrum of the sound to bloom and decay naturally. The size, shape, and alloy of the gong are carefully chosen to produce a tone that is rich in harmonics and has a long, sustaining resonance that seems to hang in the air, washing over the practitioners. In some traditions, there are specific sequences of strikes for different purposes, to call the community to meditation, to mark periods of rest, or to signal the profound silence of the deepest night meditation. Each tone is a deliberate punctuation in the silent sentence of monastic life. Yet, in our modern, hyper-connected world, the transformative potential of this ancient tool is in danger of being diluted into mere function. The gong has been appropriated by countless wellness apps, where its sample is used as a gentle, generic timer to signify the end of a 10-minute guided meditation. It's used in yoga studios to mark the transition between poses. Its sound just another element in a curated ambience of tranquility. In these contexts, it has been stripped of its disruptive power. It is no longer a weapon against illusion, but a pleasant notification, a soothing marker of temporal boundaries. It signals the end of a scheduled period of quiet, immediately pulling the practitioner back into the world of time and task, rather than shattering their perception of it. This shift from a transformative event to a functional signal forces a difficult but essential question about our contemporary search for meaning and peace. Our pursuit of enlightenment, or even just mindfulness, is now often conducted amidst a relentless barrage of noise and distraction. We meditate with our phones on Do Not Disturb, not off. We seek brief moments of calm as a respite from the storm, not a fundamental dismantling of the storm itself. The gong, in its diminished role, reflects this compromised approach. We have turned a tool designed to shatter reality into a gentle reminder that our 15 minutes are up. It highlights the tension between our deep need for awakening and our overwhelming addiction to the very distractions that make awakening so difficult. The challenge is not to hear the gong, but to allow ourselves to be utterly dismantled by it, to let its vibration erase the line between the listener and the sound, and in that seamless unity, to remember what we truly are before the first thought even arises. Gaze up at the night sky, and what do you see? A silent, cold vacuum, dotted with points of light moving in a predictable clockwork dance. But for nearly 2 millennia, the most brilliant minds in the Western world would have looked at that exact same sky and heard something you cannot, a magnificent, overwhelming symphony. This was the grand, unifying theory of the cosmos for ages, the music of the spheres. Ancient astronomers, from the Greeks to the Renaissance scholars, didn't just map the planets' paths, they listened to their song, believing that each celestial body, as it traced its perfect circle or epicycle through the heavens, emitted its own unique, pure harmonic tone. The great Claudius Ptolemy, whose geocentric model of the universe would stand unchallenged for 1400 years, didn't see his complex system of equence and deference as a silent mechanical puzzle. For him and his predecessors, it was a meticulous musical score, a divine composition where the mathematical precision of each orbital period directly correlated to a note in a perpetual celestial concert that hummed the very laws of nature into being. This celestial music, however, was not for ordinary ears. The harmonies produced by the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets were thought to be of such a sublime and rarefied frequency that they were inaudible to flawed human senses, drowned out by the constant din of our own chaotic existence on Earth. We were like someone standing too close to a rushing waterfall, unable to hear the delicate melody being played on the other side. Yet, the philosophers insisted this music was real, a physical vibration that permeated all of creation. Who, then, could hear it? It was the exclusive privilege of 2 groups, the divine sages who had purified their souls to a state of perfect receptivity, and the mathematical geniuses who could perceive the music not with their ears, but with the flawless logic of their minds. To comprehend the ratios of the planet's orbits was in itself to hear the music, because the math was the music. The universe was built on a foundation of Pythagorean intervals, and to calculate the perfect fifth between Saturn and Jupiter was to hear the very chord the gods had used to build the world. No one embodied this fervent, final quest to capture the celestial song more than Johannes Kepler, a man caught perfectly between the mystical world of the past and the scientific one he helped create. A devout believer in the Pythagorean ideal, Kepler was utterly convinced that God had designed the solar system according to harmonic principles. Driven by this faith, he spent years, decades of his life on a seemingly impossible mission to notate the music of the spheres. Poring over the precise planetary data painstakingly recorded by his mentor Tycho Brahe, Kepler tirelessly compared the planet's maximum and minimum orbital speeds, treating them like the high and low notes of a cosmic scale. In his 1619 work, Harmonious's Mundi, the Harmony of the World, he believed he had finally succeeded, assigning specific musical notes to each planet based on their angular velocity. Mars, for instance, sang a steady sol, Earth a mournful fa and mi, which Kepler fancifully interpreted as the very notes of the Latin word for famine, fame, reflecting our planet's miserable and imperfect state. His triumph, however, was bittersweet and deeply ironic, for in that very same book he also published his 3rd law of planetary motion, a piece of cold, hard, mathematical calculus that would become a cornerstone of the very mechanical universe that would soon silence the music he so loved. The origin of this entire breathtaking concept is often traced back to a single mythical moment of revelation. The story goes that the great mathematician Pythagoras, walking past a blacksmith's forge one day, was struck not by the noise but by the harmony. He noticed that hammers of different weights striking the anvil produced concordant intervals. Intrigued, he experimented further with strings of different lengths and discovered the mathematical ratios that governed pleasing sounds: the octave, the fifth, the fourth. This led him to a staggering leap of intuition. If simple numbers and ratios could create beautiful music on Earth, then surely the vast, magnificent, and perfectly ordered cosmos must be generating the most beautiful music of all. Legend claims that Pythagoras, through his profound meditative discipline, was the one mortal who had actually managed to still his own internal noise enough to perceive this cosmic symphony directly, an experience so overwhelming it was said to be both ecstatic and terrifying, a glimpse of a truth too magnificent for most men to bear. The profound and poignant silence that followed is the sound of a paradigm shifting. The song of the stars did not stop, we simply changed our interpretation of the data. Kepler's laws and Newton's universal law of gravitation provided a new, breathtakingly powerful explanation for why the planets moved as they did. The elegant, musical dance was recast as a silent, brutal tug of war governed by invisible forces and equations. The romantic notion of planetary harmonies was reduced to the cold, clinical reality of gravitational waves, ripples in space-time caused by colossal cosmic events, detectable only by impossibly sensitive machinery and utterly devoid of any musical quality. The poetic universe, which spoke to humanity through the language of music and metaphor, was replaced by a mechanical one which operated by silent, impersonal, and mathematically expressible laws. We gained a universe we could predict with astonishing accuracy, but we lost one that sang to us in the process. The silence of the spheres, then, is the sound of disenchantment itself, the price we paid for a clockwork cosmos that runs with impeccable precision, but hums not a single, solitary note. For countless generations, long before the written word carved history into stone, the world was not a silent place to be observed, but a chorus of voices to be understood. In indigenous traditions across the globe, from the vast red deserts of Australia to the deep, whispering pine forests of North America, the very fabric of reality is woven with sound, and the most important of these are the voices of those who have walked the land before. This is not a metaphor. For cultures rooted in a deep, reciprocal relationship with place, the ancestors are not gone. They are a present and active consciousness, and they speak constantly. Their language, however, is not one of human words. It is the specific rustle of wind through a particular stand of grandmother trees, the distinct call of an eagle circling at a sacred moment, the rhythm of a drum that matches the heartbeat of the earth during a ceremony. These sounds are the whisper of the ancestors, a vibrational guidance system that offers wisdom, issues warnings, and maintains a living, breathing dialogue between the past and the present. This profound auditory connection forms the core of oral history, where knowledge is not stored in libraries but carried on the breath and felt in the bones. Among the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, the concept of the dreamtime is not a distant myth but a continuous, vibrating reality. The land itself is sung into existence through ancient songlines, melodic maps that detail every waterhole, mountain, and trail. A skilled elder, listening to the wind hum across a specific rock formation or the way a hunniator calls near a dry riverbed, is not just hearing nature. They are receiving directions, weather reports, and moral lessons encoded by the ancestral beings who created that landscape. The sound is the map, the law, and the story, all resonating at once, Similarly, many Native American traditions hold that animal calls are deliberate messages. The sudden, urgent cry of a fox near a campsite might be a warning to break camp immediately, an ancestral voice using the creature's lungs to signal an approaching danger unseen by human eyes. The steady, confident drumming during a powwow is not merely for rhythm, it is the pulse of the community's heart, a sound that calls the ancestors to join the circle, to dance among the living, and to bless the gathering with their presence. There are powerful, specific accounts that have been passed down that testify to the tangible power of this listening. One story from the Lakota people tells of a chief who was leading his band to a new hunting ground. As they traveled, a young owl began to call incessantly from a branch directly in their path. To most, it was just an owl, but the chief, trained to listen beyond the surface, heard a specific, anxious repetition in the call that his grandfather had once told him meant turn back. Heeding this sonic warning, he insisted the band alter their course, a decision that was met with grumbling until scouts later returned to report that their original path would have led them directly into the heart of a rival war party. The owl's call was not coincidence, it was an intentional communication, a vocal intervention from the spirit world that averted disaster. In another example, an Aboriginal elder from the Kimberley region in Australia once described how, during a period of severe drought, the community gathered to sing the songlines for the rain. They sang for days, their voices growing hoarse, until finally, their chant was answered not by rain, but by a specific, low-pitched humming that seemed to emanate from the surrounding cliffs, a sound described in the oldest stories as the voice of the rainbow serpent, the creator being. Taking this as a sign of approval, they continued their ceremony, and the rains came shortly after. The sound was both an acknowledgement and an affirmation. The violent onslaught of colonization and the relentless pressure of modernization have acted like a blade severing this auditory nerve. Missionaries condemned these practices as pagan superstition, forcibly removing children from their families and into residential schools where their native languages, and by extension, their ability to hear the world in their traditional way, were brutally beaten out of them. Governments outlawed sacred ceremonies, silencing the drums and the chants that were the primary channels for ancestral communication. Industrialization created a constant, low-frequency drone of machinery and urban noise that drowned out the subtle frequencies of the natural world, making it nearly impossible to hear the whisper on the wind. This was more than a cultural loss. It was a form of spiritual deafness, a collective amnesia imposed upon entire populations, cutting them off from a foundational source of identity, guidance, and resilience. The ancestral voices did not stop speaking. An entire world was systematically conditioned to stop listening. This deliberate silencing makes the ongoing preservation of these auditory traditions an act of both cultural and spiritual survival. Today, indigenous elders and knowledge keepers are in a race against time, working to document and teach these sonic languages to younger generations before they are lost forever. They are not just saving songs, they are safeguarding a complete way of being in the world. A mode of perception that understands intelligence is not just stored in the human brain, but is broadcast through the entire living network of a place. The loss of this heritage is a loss for all of humanity, a fading of a frequency band that once allowed us to converse with the wisdom of the past and navigate the present with a deeper, more connected understanding. The whisper of the ancestors is a reminder that we are never truly alone, that we are part of a long, unbroken chain of being, and that if we can quiet the noise of the modern world and truly listen, we might just hear the guidance that has been there all along, waiting for us to remember how to hear it. High above the rugged peaks of the Pacific Northwest and across the sweeping Great Plains, the sky was not an empty expanse but a living, breathing entity. and its voice was the explosive, world-shaking crash of the thunderbird. For the Haida, Tlingit, and Kwakwaka'wakwa peoples of the coastal forests, this colossal supernatural being was no mere bird. It was a primordial force of nature made manifest, so immense that the flapping of its wings was the rolling boom of thunder, and the flashing of its keen, intelligent eyes was the sudden, brilliant fork of lightning that split the sky. To the Lakota on the plains, it was known as Wakinyan, a sacred power that brought both terrifying destruction and the life-giving rains that sustained the buffalo herds, and by extension, the people themselves. This sound was the ultimate expression of nature's dual character, a terrifyingly destructive power that was simultaneously the source of all life, a paradox that echoed the very cycle of existence. The relationship with this awesome power was not one of passive fear, but of active, respectful engagement. The sound of the thunderbird's approach was a call to ritual and reverence. Among the Lakota, the arrival of a thunderstorm was a sacred event. People would bring their children inside not just for safety, but to listen and learn, to hear the voice of Wakinyan and understand its power. Certain individuals, known as Heyoka, were sacred clowns or contraries who had been visited by the thunder being in a dream or vision. Their role was to live and behave in opposites, making people laugh during solemn ceremonies or wearing heavy winter clothes in the summer heat. This paradoxical behavior was a form of reverence, a way to mirror the contrary nature of the thunderbird itself, which could bring both life and death. By embodying this contradiction, the Heyoka helped the community process the awe and terror of the storm, transforming fear into a form of sacred understanding and social cohesion. This engagement was even more direct for the medicine men and shamans, who possessed the knowledge to interact with the thunderbird's power directly. It was believed that particularly powerful shamans could, through intense concentration and the use of specific sacred songs, imitate the deep, guttural cry of the thunderbird. This was not an attempt to mock the being, but to communicate with it, to show respect and establish a kinship that could persuade it to act favorably. A well-known legend from the Haida tradition tells of a village suffering a prolonged drought, their salmon streams running low and their cedar forests growing dry and brittle. The chief's shaman retreated to a high mountain peak, a place known to be close to the thunderbird's home. For 4 days and nights he fasted and chanted, and on the 4th day, as storm clouds gathered, he did not plead for rain. Instead, he threw back his head and emitted a powerful, vibrating cry that echoed the thunderbird's own voice. The story says the sky answered immediately with a deafening crack of thunder, not as a rebuke, but as an acknowledgement, followed by a drenching, gentle rain that saved the village. The shaman's cry was a key that turned the lock of the storm. The image and the sound of the thunderbird were thus woven into the very fabric of daily and ceremonial life. Its formidable visage was carved onto towering totem poles, serving as a guardian figure at the entrance of a clan house, its power protecting the inhabitants from evil spirits. On the plains, its symbol was painted on shields and tipis, a declaration that the warrior or family lived under the protection and with the courage of the sacred being. During potlatch ceremonies or sun dances, dancers would wear elaborate masks and regalia adorned with its feathers, moving in a way that mimicked the powerful, swooping flight of the great bird, their movements and the accompanying drumbeats serving as a human echo of the celestial drama playing out in the skies above. These were not mere decorations or performances, they were acts of vibrational sympathy, a way to keep the community's spirit in harmony with the most powerful forces in their world, ensuring balance and continuity. This intimate, resonant relationship, however, could not withstand the tidal wave of colonization and forced assimilation. As indigenous children were taken to residential schools and forbidden from speaking their languages or practicing their ceremonies, the knowledge of how to listen to the thunderbird, how to distinguish its different cries, how to respond with the appropriate song or ritual began to fade. The government's suppression of potlatches and other sacred gatherings in both the United States and Canada deliberately severed the transmission of this sonic wisdom from elder to youth. Furthermore, the scientific explanation of weather as a purely mechanical process of atmospheric pressure and electrical discharge, while factually correct, offered a silent, disenchanted alternative to the thunderbird's crashing narrative. The sound was gradually stripped of its sacred meaning and relegated to the realm of folklore, a colorful story from a past that modernity had supposedly outgrown. The fading echo of the thunderbird's crash is therefore a profound loss that extends far beyond mythology. It represents the severing of a deep, experiential relationship with the raw, untamable power of the natural world. Where indigenous cultures heard a conscious, communicative force in the thunderclap, we now hear only an impersonal meteorological event. This shift reflects a broader human retreat from a participatory world view to an observational one, where nature is a resource to be managed or a spectacle to be observed from behind a window, not a conscious presence to be engaged with and respected. The silence that has replaced the thunderbird's voice is the sound of that distance, a chilling quiet that underscores our modern struggle to find our place within nature's fury and grace, rather than imagining ourselves as separate from it, safe and silent in our constructed worlds. In the hushed stillness of a deep meditative state, a seasoned yogi begins to perceive something unexpected, not a mantra, not a visual image, but a sound. It starts as a faint, almost imperceptible sibilance at the base of his spine, a subtle vibration that seems to hum with latent energy. As his concentration deepens, the sound grows clearer, sharper, unmistakable in its character. It is a sustained, psychic hiss, the sound of a serpent uncoiling not in the external world, but along the very axis of his being. This is the awakening of the Kundalini, the primal serpent power described in tantric traditions, and its signature sound is the catalyst for the most profound spiritual transformation a human can undergo. This ancient, internal vibration connects him directly to a symbol that has slithered through the dreams and myths of virtually every culture on Earth, the serpent, whose hiss is the universal sound of dangerous, transformative knowledge. This single, sibilant note carries a breathtaking and paradoxical weight across human history. In the biblical Genesis, it is the sound that precedes the fall, the whisper that offers the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. That hiss is the vibration of temptation, the catalyst for exile from innocence, but also the irrevocable beginning of human consciousness, moral awareness, and free will. The serpent's sound brings a catastrophic curse, but it also opens the door to a more complex, conscious, and ultimately redeemed humanity. This duality is mirrored perfectly in the ancient Greek symbol of the caduceus, two serpents entwined around a winged staff. Here, the hiss is not one of temptation but of healing and reconciliation, a sound that harmonizes opposing forces and became the enduring emblem for the medical arts. The serpent's voice can poison or provide the antidote. It can spell death or promise rebirth, its meaning entirely dependent on context, intention, and the readiness of the one who hears it. This sophisticated understanding of the serpent's acoustic power reached a stunning apex in Mesoamerican civilizations. For the Maya, the serpent was not a mere animal but a conduit to the spirit world. Their immense stepped pyramids, like the Temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza, are masterpieces of architectural psychoacoustics. During the equinoxes, the play of light creates the illusion of a massive feathered serpent slithering down the staircase. But the true magic is auditory. A single clap or shout at the base of the pyramid stairs is transformed as it echoes, returning to the listener not as a simple reverberation, but as a distinct, piercing chirp that mimics the sound of the sacred Quetzal bird. Archaeologists and acoustical engineers believe this was entirely intentional. The designers engineered the massive stone steps to act as diffraction gratings, filtering sound to produce this specific frequency. For a Maya priest, this manufactured chirp hiss was the audible manifestation of the serpent spirit descending, a vibrational bridge between the human realm and the world of the gods, triggered by human ritual to open a channel of communication. The experience of the modern yogi, then, is not a hallucination but a participation in this ancient cross-cultural archetype. In Kundalini Yoga, the serpent is a metaphor for the dormant spiritual energy coiled at the base of the spine. The goal of intense pranayama breathing, specific physical postures, and deep meditation is to awaken this energy, to have it uncoil and ascend through the central channel of the body, piercing each energy center or chakra along the way. Practitioners who have experienced this often describe a distinct auditory component, a rising internal hiss or rush of energy that accompanies the intense physical sensations of heat and vibration. This inner sound is considered a sign of successful activation, the audible signature of a process that unlocks hidden psychic potentials and leads to a state of enlightened unity or samadhi. The hiss is the key turning in the lock of higher consciousness. Yet, in the stark, rational light of modern Western society, this potent, dualistic symbol has been largely flattened and demonized. The serpent's hiss has been stripped of its sacred ambiguity and reduced to a universal signifier of pure evil, danger, and deceit, thanks overwhelmingly to a simplistic reading of the Genesis story. We see it in our language: a snake is a traitor, a viper is a malicious person. This fear is deeply ingrained, a primal response to a very real physical threat that has completely overshadowed the creature's other, more nuanced mythological roles. We have pathologized the internal experience as well. A meditator who claims to hear a serpent's hiss might be referred to a psychiatrist rather than a spiritual teacher. We have collectively dismissed a profound vibrational metaphor, losing the wisdom that true transformation is never a safe, comfortable, or purely positive process. It always requires a death of the old self, a confrontation with shadow, a journey through a dangerous but necessary knowledge. This cultural silencing of the serpent's hiss speaks to a profound ambivalence we hold about truth itself. We claim to seek enlightenment and personal growth, but we often want it delivered in a safe, sanitized, and easy-to-digest package. The serpent reminds us that the most valuable truths are rarely comfortable. They are disruptive, destabilizing, and often arrive with a cost: the cost of our preconceptions, our comfortable illusions, and our naive innocence. Its hiss is the sound of that challenging bargain. To fear the hiss is to fear the fundamentally disruptive nature of genuine awakening, to prefer the quiet prison of the known over the terrifying but liberating symphony of the unknown. The absence of its whisper in our collective consciousness is not a sign of progress, but a warning that we have chosen a quieter, simpler world over a deeper, more true one, however disquieting its revelations may be. In the serene precincts of a Japanese temple, as the last light of day fades and the world seems to hold its breath, there is one sound that defines the transition from the mundane to the sacred: the deep, resonant, and impossibly clear chime of a massive bronze bell. This is not a sound that simply travels through the air. It seems to vibrate through the very ground, through the body of the listener, and into the stillness of the mind itself. In both Shinto and Buddhist traditions that have interwoven for centuries in Japan, this sound is understood as far more than a signal or a melody. It is an active force of purification, a vibrational broom that sweeps away invisible spiritual dust and psychic grime, cleansing a space or a soul of malevolent influences and preparing it to receive blessings. The bell's tone is a sonic ablution, washing the listener clean without a single drop of water. This profound practice finds its most powerful expression in the annual Joya no Cane ceremony held on New Year's Eve. As the final night of the year deepens, temple priests take turns striking a great bell 108 times. This number is deeply significant in Buddhist philosophy, representing the 108 earthly desires or defilements that are said to cause human suffering, everything from greed and anger to arrogance and doubt. Each ponderous, resonant chime is targeted at one of these specific mental afflictions. The idea is not to simply count down to midnight, but to perform a collective exorcism. As the final chime fades into the cold winter air, it signifies that the old year, along with all its accumulated spiritual baggage, has been vibrationally expelled. The community enters the new year not just chronologically renewed, but spiritually scrubbed, their metaphorical slates wiped clean by the power of resonant bronze. It is one of the most widespread and beloved sonic rituals in the world, a shared auditory experience that unites millions in a moment of intentional purification. The effect of this practice on visitors, even those with no particular religious affiliation, is often immediate and palpable. Many describe a physical sensation, a vibration in the chest that seems to synchronize their heartbeat, a tingling along the spine, or a sudden, deep calm that washes over them as the sound waves pass through their body. One Western traveler recounted her experience at a remote mountain temple during Joya no Cane. She had arrived feeling anxious and burdened by the stresses of a long journey and personal worries. As the first chime rang out, she expected a loud noise, but what she experienced was something entirely different. It wasn't heard so much as felt, she said. It was like a deep, musical shockwave that traveled up from the soles of my feet. With each subsequent chime, I could feel the tight knots in my shoulders and the frantic chatter in my mind just unravel. I wasn't thinking about my problems anymore. I was just following the sound, breath by breath, as it faded into silence. I left feeling lighter, as if I had literally shed a weight I didn't know I was carrying. This account echoes the experiences of countless others who have felt the bell's tone operate not on an intellectual level, but on a cellular one, realigning their state of being through vibration. The meticulous craftsmanship behind these bells, known as bonsho, is a sacred art in itself, designed to maximize this transformative acoustic effect. They are not cast like ordinary bells, but are painstakingly formed using a technique that has remained largely unchanged for over 1,000 years. The molten bronze is poured into a mold built around a clay core, and the bell's distinctive, haunting tone is shaped by countless hours of tuning. Artisans carefully scrape the inner surface while the metal is still hot, shaving off infinitesimal amounts of material to perfect its harmonic profile. The striker, a large suspended log, is swung slowly and with great precision to strike the bell at a specific point on its rim. The result is a tone rich in overlapping harmonics, with a sustaining resonance that can last for minutes, during which the sound seems to evolve and travel, creating a complex auditory experience that feels alive and intelligent. The bell is not an instrument, it is a singular, purpose-built device for generating a specific state of consciousness. Yet, a slow and subtle shift is occurring in modern Japan. While the bells still ring and the ceremonies are still attended, the pervasive growth of secularism and the frantic pace of contemporary life are altering their perceived purpose. For many, particularly in urban centers, the Joya no Cane is less a profound spiritual cleansing and more a traditional cultural event, a picturesque marker of the holiday season, akin to watching fireworks on the 4th of July. The deep philosophical understanding of the 108 desires is often lost, replaced by a vague sense of custom and nostalgia. The vibrational power of the sound, its ability to actually purify and transform, is increasingly overlooked, its efficacy relegated to the realm of poetic metaphor rather than accepted as a tangible phenomenon. The chime is becoming a beautiful, empty vessel, its form preserved but its potent function slowly fading from collective memory. This quiet transition from the sacred to the cultural invites a deeply personal and universally relevant question for all of us, regardless of background. In our increasingly noisy, chaotic, and spiritually polluted modern environments, how do we purify our own spaces and our own minds? We spend billions on air purifiers, water filters, and noise-canceling headphones to clean our physical environment, but we lack tools for cleansing the intangible atmosphere of our homes and psyches from the residue of stress, negativity, and digital overload. The resonant ritual of the temple bell offers a powerful alternative model. It suggests that purification need not be a silent, internal struggle, but can be an active, externalized, and shared sonic practice. It challenges us to consider what our own modern equivalents of the 108 chimes might be, perhaps a few minutes of intentional silence, a piece of music that truly centers us, or even the deliberate act of speaking words of kindness into a tense room. The fading sacred purpose of the temple bell is not a loss, but an invitation to rediscover the power of sound not as background noise, but as a conscious technology for crafting a cleaner, clearer, and more peaceful state of being. Amidst the din and chaos of a Viking Age battlefield, a sound would sometimes cut through the roar of combat that would make even the most seasoned warrior pause, a high, unearthly cry, neither fully human nor animal, that seemed to slice through the fog of war with chilling clarity. This was the call of the Valkyries, the choosers of the slain. Norse mythology paints these figures not as gentle angels of mercy, but as formidable, even fearsome, shield maidens of Odin, riding through the sky on armored horses, their helmets gleaming. Their primary duty was not to protect, but to observe, to make the ultimate judgment on who lived, who died, and most importantly, whose spirit was worthy of an eternal afterlife in the great hall of Valhalla. Their eerie, piercing call was the sound of fate itself being announced, a sonic verdict that was as final as it was terrifying. To hear it was to know your death warrant had been signed by the gods themselves. This sound masterfully embodied a profound Norse paradox, a cultural embrace of a beautiful brutality. The Valkyrie's cry was terrifying because it heralded a violent, bloody end on some forgotten field. Yet it was simultaneously the most honorable sound a warrior could hope to hear, for it was an immediate summons to the side of the All-Father. Dying ignobly of old age or sickness in bed was a fate to be avoided. Dying in battle with the Valkyrie's cry ringing in your ears was the ultimate aspiration. This duality is captured perfectly in the Old Norse word for these beings, Valkyrja, which literally translates to chooser of the fallen. They didn't create the fate, they discerned it, their call acting as the audible confirmation of a destiny already woven by the Norns at the foot of Yggdrasil. Their sound was the moment the tapestry of a man's life was pulled taut, revealing its final, glorious pattern. We get some of our most vivid descriptions of this sound not from the ancient sagas alone, but from a 19th century composer who became utterly obsessed with the myth. Richard Wagner, in his monumental operatic cycle Der Ring des Nibelungen, gave the Valkyries their most famous modern sonic identity with The Ride of the Valkyries. The piece is a staggering orchestral achievement, a galloping, frenetic tempest of brass and strings that doesn't just describe the Valkyries' flight, it is the flight. The famous leitmotif, with its soaring, triumphant female voices crying Hajatoho over the orchestral chaos, is a perfect artistic interpretation of that Norse duality. It is at once exhilaratingly beautiful and utterly brutal, filled with the ecstasy of battle and the grim finality of death. Wagner took the eerie cry from the page and turned it into an overwhelming auditory experience that has, for millions, become inseparable from the myth itself, proving the enduring power of this sonic idea. The Vikings themselves, living in a world where this belief was a tangible reality, didn't just wait passively to hear this call. They actively sought to invoke its power and emulate its courage. Before battle, berserkers and other warriors would work themselves into a trance-like state known as berserkergang. This wasn't just silent rage, it was a sonic ritual. They would chant, gnash their teeth, howl, and beat their weapons against their shields, creating a terrifying cacophony meant to channel the fury of Odin and the fearsome spirit of the Valkyries. This wasn't mere intimidation for the enemy, though it certainly served that purpose. It was a profound psychological tool. By making themselves the source of that terrifying, otherworldly battle cry, they were essentially trying to become the agents of their own destiny. They were not waiting to be chosen, they were screaming to the gods that they were already worthy, forcing their way into Valhalla through the sheer, resonant power of their own ferocious voices. This entire worldview, where a specific sound could so clearly delineate honor from disgrace and determine the eternal destination of the soul, could not survive the end of the Viking Age. The spread of Christianity throughout Scandinavia gradually reframed these beliefs. The Valkyries, along with Odin and Thor, were recast as demons or foolish pagan delusions. The ideal of a glorious death in battle was replaced by the Christian virtue of a pious death, hoping for salvation and heaven. The call that once decided a warrior's fate was stripped of its sacred meaning and slowly faded into the realm of children's stories and fantastical legends, its power diminished to that of a spooky ghost tale told around a fire. It lost its role as the ultimate arbiter of a meaningful death. This historical silence echoes with a surprisingly modern resonance. Today, we are largely left without such resonant, collective metaphors for mortality. Death is often medicalized, hidden away in hospitals, and spoken of in hushed, clinical, or fearful tones. We lack a shared cultural sound, a clear, honorable call that helps us make sense of life's end and gives it a framework of meaning. The silence left by the Valkyries' cry parallels our own deep, often unspoken, struggle to find meaning in our inevitable mortality without the powerful, collective stories that once made sense of it. We are left to face the void alone without a shared song to guide us, searching for meaning in the quiet rather than in a decisive, if terrifying, cosmic fanfare. The absence of their call challenges us to ask what, in our own silent world, might possibly serve as a worthy substitute for that fateful, beautiful, brutal sound. High atop the remote Himalayan plateaus, in monasteries where the air itself feels thin and charged with intention, an act of breathtaking beauty unfolds with the patience of geological time. Monks sit in perfect stillness, surrounded by millions of grains of brilliantly colored sand, and from their lips comes not a song, but a deep, resonant, and unwavering hum. This is the foundational sound of the mandala, a vibrational scaffold upon which an entire universe of sacred geometry is meticulously built. The creation of a sand mandala is not a silent art, it is a profound sonic architecture. Each chant, each syllable, each sustained tone is believed to generate a specific frequency that actively structures the space, purifying it of negative energies and aligning it with the enlightened mind of the deity being visualized. The hum is not a soundtrack to the work, It is the very mortar that holds the invisible dimensions of the mandala together, long before a single grain of sand is laid in place. This intricate process is a masterclass in the Tantric Buddhist understanding of reality, where sound, form, and mind are not separate, but are deeply interwoven threads of the same cosmic tapestry. The monks are not merely drawing a picture, they are performing a sacred act of world-building, as they chant the specific mantras and seed syllables associated with a deity like Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, or Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. They are not just asking for that quality to appear. They are using the resonant properties of sound to manifest that quality in the environment, to vibrate it into existence. The sand, carefully placed with ancient metal funnels called chak-pur, becomes the physical anchor for this sonic energy, a visual echo of a vibration that has already saturated the air. The mandala you can see is simply the shadow of the mandala you can hear, a sacred geometry made audible before it becomes visible. The ultimate purpose of this immense, painstaking labor, however, is its complete and total dissolution. Once the final grain of sand is placed and the magnificent, multi-colored palace of the deity is complete, after days or even weeks of work, the ceremony takes its most profound turn. The monks gather, and with a few swift strokes of a ritual tool, they sweep the entire intricate universe into a pile of mixed, mundane dust. This act is accompanied by a final, powerful chant, a release of all the energy that was so carefully built up. The collected sand is then carried in a procession to a flowing body of water and poured in, a blessing that disperses the mandala's harmonizing vibrations out into the wider world. This ritual of destruction is the entire point, a powerful, visceral lesson in the core Buddhist tenet of impermanence. The hum that built the world is the same sound that lets it go, teaching that true peace is found not in clinging to beautiful forms, but in understanding the luminous, empty space from which all form arises and to which it all returns. For the monks themselves, the continuous hum is an essential tool for their own inner journey. It serves as a powerful aid to visualization, a sonic anchor that keeps the mind focused on the incredibly complex, three-dimensional mental image of the deity's celestial palace they must hold in their mind's eye. The vibration acts as a feedback loop. The purer and more focused the tone, the clearer the internal visualization becomes, and the clearer the visualization, the more potent the sound is believed to be. Beyond the mental discipline, the practice is also deeply connected to healing. It is believed that the specific frequencies generated can rebalance the subtle energy channels within the body, dissolving blockages and promoting a state of holistic well-being. A renowned Lama once explained that the hum of the mandala is like a sonic acupuncture, not just for one person, but for the entire local environment, healing the spiritual atmosphere of a place that has been bruised by conflict, negativity, or simply the chaotic vibrations of modern life. In recent decades, however, this deeply esoteric and protected practice has found itself on a global stage. The mesmerizing beauty of the sand painting process has made it a sought-after exhibition for museums and cultural centers worldwide. While this has raised awareness and appreciation for Tibetan culture, it has also created a subtle but significant dilution of the practice's acoustic potency. In a museum hall filled with the whispers of tourists and the rustle of cellophane, the monk's sacred hum is often drowned out, reduced to a curious background noise. The pressure to perform, to complete the mandala on a schedule for an audience, can shift the focus from the internal, spiritual goal of the ritual to the external, aesthetic product. The profound silence and dissolution ceremony, meant to be a shocking lesson in non-attachment, can sometimes feel like a theatrical finale for a paying audience, its spiritual gravity diminished by the flash of cameras. This quiet shift from a sacred, vibrational ritual to a public performance is a microcosm of a much larger, more pervasive silence creeping into our world. The hum of the mandala represents the very antithesis of the frantic, high-speed, results-oriented noise that defines our modern existence. It is the sound of immense effort applied with infinite patience for a purpose that is ultimately intangible and immediately destroyed. Its gradual quieting in its authentic form is a warning siren, alerting us to the loss of slow, intentional, and purposeful sound. We are surrounded by noise that demands our reaction, alarms, notifications, headlines, but we are bereft of sounds that invite our deep contemplation. The mandala's hum does not seek to sell us anything, alert us to anything, or hurry us along. Its only purpose is to harmonize, to focus, and to remind us of the beautiful, fleeting nature of all things. Its fading resonance challenges us to ask what kind of sounds we are choosing to fill our lives with, and what silent, sacred geometries within us are crumbling because we have forgotten how to hum them back into being. Deep in the sun-scorched heart of Australia, the land itself holds a memory and speaks with a voice that predates human history. For the Aboriginal peoples, the continent is not a passive landscape to be owned, but a living, breathing text inscribed with the stories of the Dreamtime, the epic era when ancestral beings sang the world into existence. And in certain sacred places, winding sandstone canyons that curve like the ribs of a great, slumbering creature, this living text finds its voice. These are not silent geological formations. They are nature's own grand amplifiers, designed to carry the songs of the dreaming, transforming a human chant into a reverberating chorus that includes every ancestor who has ever sung that same note into the same stone. The echo here is not a mere acoustic curiosity. It is the physical proof of an unbroken conversation across time, a resonant thread connecting the present moment directly back to the very first sunrise. This profound understanding transformed these canyons into the most sacred of open-air classrooms and cathedrals. During elaborate initiation ceremonies, elders wouldn't just tell the stories of the ancestral beings. They would sing them, their voices pitched to activate the canyon's unique acoustics. A single, powerful call could bounce and multiply, returning as a layered, complex harmony that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. For a young initiate hearing this for the first time, the effect was transformative. It wasn't just an elder teaching them. It felt as if the ancestors themselves were in the canyon, their voices woven into the echo, confirming the truth of the lore being passed down. The sound became a tangible link to their identity, a vibrational map of their belonging to that specific place and its timeless story. The canyon didn't just hold the ceremony, it participated in it, its echo acting as the validating voice of the past, giving approval to the future. These natural soundscapes were also integral to practical navigation and survival in a vast and often unforgiving land. Specific rock formations were known to produce distinct echoes when struck with a clapstick or called to in a certain way. A sharp, quick return might indicate a narrow passage ahead, while a long, rolling echo could suggest a large, open cavern or a vital water source hidden from view. There are countless stories passed down through generations of travelers being guided by these sonic landmarks. One tale tells of a man separated from his family group during a sudden dust storm, his vision reduced to a choking orange haze. Disoriented and losing hope, he remembered his grandfather's teaching. He cupped his hands and let out a long, specific call, a sound his people used to signal their location. The canyon walls, invisible in the storm, caught his call and threw it back to him not as a single echo, but as a clear, directional beam. By listening to the way the sound returned, he could discern the shape of the land around him and slowly, carefully, navigate his way to the shelter of an overhang where he waited safely for the storm to pass. The echo didn't just save his life, it reaffirmed the profound wisdom encoded in his culture's relationship with the land. The disruptive forces of urbanization, mining, and mass tourism, however, have acted like a knife severing this ancient auditory nerve. The relentless, low-frequency drone of highways and mining equipment miles away can create a constant sonic smog that masks the subtle, higher-frequency echoes, rendering them inaudible. Even more directly, the sheer volume of tourists, often unaware of the sacredness of a site, can shatter the delicate acoustic environment with their chatter, laughter, and the electronic beeps of their devices. A canyon that once required reverent silence to hear its secrets is now often filled with the chaotic noise of a crowd, making the subtle, layered echoes impossible to perceive. This is more than just noise pollution. It is a form of cultural vandalism, actively erasing the functionality of a living library and severing the primary channel through which knowledge was transmitted for millennia. The silencing of these cultural echoes represents a catastrophic loss far greater than the loss of a few old stories. It is the loss of an entire way of knowing, a unique sensory technology that wove navigation, law, history, and spirituality into a single, resonant experience. When the echo in the canyon falls silent, a chapter of human understanding closes forever. This isn't a loss just for Aboriginal Australians. It is a loss for all of humanity, a fading of a frequency band that once allowed us to hear the world not as a resource to be exploited, but as a conscious, communicative partner in the journey of life. The quiet that now settles over many of these canyons is a poignant monument to this rupture, a silent plea for us to reconsider our relationship with the sonic environment and to recognize that some of the world's most precious heritages are not meant to be seen behind glass, but to be heard on the wind. Imagine the sheer, vertiginous scale of a medieval cathedral, the vaulted ceilings that seem to brush the heavens, the massive stone pillars, the cavernous space that swallows the light. Now fill that immense void not with the noise of a crowd, but with a single, unwavering note, pure and clear, rising from a small group of hooded figures. This is the sound of Gregorian chant, a sonic architecture designed not for entertainment, but for transcendence. The monks who sang these plain songs understood sound as a physical and spiritual ladder, each Latin syllable and carefully measured harmony a rung to be climbed, pulling the soul out of the mundane world and toward a direct, vibrational union with the divine. In the absolute silence of the monastery, punctuated only by the canonical hours of prayer, this chant was the audible breath of their community, the resonant core of a life dedicated to seeking God not through words alone, but through the very frequency of devotion. The philosophy behind this practice was rooted in a profound belief that the universe itself was structured according to divine harmony, a concept inherited from Pythagoras and Plato but baptized into Christian thought. The monotonous single-line melody of early chant, known as plainchant, was not a lack of creativity. It was a deliberate simplification, a stripping away of musical complexity that was thought to cloud the mind. The goal was unisono, not just singing in unison, but achieving a unity of soul, where the individual ego dissolved into the collective voice, becoming a single instrument for the divine. As chant evolved into polyphony, the addition of harmonies wasn't for aesthetic pleasure, but to acoustically represent the celestial hierarchy, the interplay of different orders of angels singing in perpetual praise around the throne of God. The sound was a mathematical and mystical blueprint of a perfectly ordered cosmos, and by singing it, the monks were aligning their own imperfect human reality with that heavenly ideal. No figure embodies this mystical relationship with sacred sound more powerfully than the 12th century abbess, composer, and visionary Hildegard of Bingen. For Hildegard, her compositions were not written. They were received in flashes of divine revelation, entire chants downloaded into her consciousness during ecstatic states. She described her process as hearing the harmony of heaven, a symphony she then struggled to translate into human notation. Her compositions, like the soaring O Viridissima Virga, are radically different from the more restrained chants of her time. They feature wide, leaping melodic ranges that mimic the flight of the soul, and lyrics that are dense, poetic, and bursting with vibrant, natural imagery. She saw the human body itself as a resonant vessel, with the soul singing in the voice and the body sounding through the tongue. For her, to chant was to physically manifest the harmony between the microcosm of the human being and the macrocosm of God's creation, a healing, holistic act that restored balance to both singer and listener. The very stones of their churches were co-conspirators in this sonic mysticism. The architects of these great cathedrals were, in effect, master acoustic engineers, though they would not have used the term. The long, hard reverberation time, often lasting 6 or 7 seconds or more, was not an accident, it was a feature. A single syllable sung by a monk would hang in the air, overlapping with the next, blurring the individual words into a continuous, shimmering cloud of sound. This acoustic effect, known as a resonant frequency, actively altered the consciousness of those within. It made the source of the music impossible to locate. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, from the very air, creating the palpable sensation that the building was alive and singing along, that the monks were joined by an unseen heavenly choir. The architecture became a giant resonating chamber, designed to induce a trance-like state, where the boundaries between self and sound, between earth and heaven, completely dissolved. The slow fading of this profound practice is a story of a fundamental shift in spiritual sensibility. The Protestant Reformation, with its emphasis on the intelligibility of Scripture, often viewed complex Latin chant with deep suspicion, seeing it as a mysterious, potentially papist distraction from the plain word of God. The Catholic Church's own Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, while not abolishing chant, encouraged the use of the vernacular in Mass. This well-intentioned move towards accessibility had an unintended consequence. The ancient, resonant Latin texts were gradually replaced by folk guitars, hymnals, and contemporary worship music sung in the local language. The focus shifted dramatically from the experiential, vibrational power of the sound to the intellectual comprehension of the lyric. Worship moved from a state of mystical participation to one of communal sing-along, from a transformative vibration that altered perception to a form of spiritual entertainment that aimed to uplift the mood. This leaves us with a silent, haunting question that echoes through the empty, soaring naves of those old cathedrals. In our quest for a more accessible, relevant, and emotionally engaging form of worship, what profound dimension of experience did we inadvertently sacrifice? The decline of Gregorian chant represents more than just a change in musical style. It signifies a retreat from a worldview that sought transcendence through disciplined, resonant surrender to something greater than the self. We now often seek the divine in the stirring emotional swell of a praise band or the comforting clarity of a sermon, but we have largely abandoned the ancient technology of using sound itself as a direct vehicle to travel beyond the limits of the ego. The chant's absence challenges us to ask how we might once again create spaces both physical and sonic, that don't just tell us about the sacred, but that allow us to vibrate with it, to feel its resonance in our bones, and to remember that some truths are not understood by the mind, but heard by the soul. After a journey across continents and millennia, listening for the echoes of 26 sacred sounds that once shaped reality, we are left with the most profound vibration of all the silence that followed. This is not a simple absence, a mere nothingness where noise used to be. This is the 27th sound, the sound of the void itself, a resonant quiet that ancient myths from every corner of the world interpret as a fundamental shift in the very nature of existence. The Hindu sages spoke of a Kali Yuga, an age of darkness and spiritual ignorance where humanity's connection to the divine becomes muffled and faint. The Norse prophecies of Ragnarök tell of a long winter that follows the twilight of the gods, a silent, barren period before a new world is reborn. The Abrahamic tradition holds the silence of God after the closing of the canon, a withdrawal of direct prophetic utterance. This cosmic quiet is universally understood not as an end, but as a potent, pregnant pause, a canvas of pure potential waiting for new harmonics to be written upon it, but also a stark warning of our collective spiritual deafness, a symptom of a disconnection so deep we have forgotten what we are even listening for. This profound silence, however, has been systematically filled and masked by a new, artificial symphony of our own making, the relentless cacophony of modern noise pollution. We have traded the hum of Yggdrasil for the drone of server farms, the chant of the Vedas for the algorithmic playlist, the whisper of the muse for the endless ping of notifications. This isn't just an auditory nuisance. It's a form of existential static, a constant, low-grade vibration of distraction that prevents us from ever touching the deeper, foundational silence beneath it all. We have built a world that is terrified of quiet, equating it with boredom or loneliness, and in doing so, we have erected a sonic barrier between ourselves and the subtle truths that can only be perceived in stillness. The sacred sounds didn't just fade on their own. We drowned them out, plugging our own ears with a ceaseless stream of digital and mechanical clamor, unaware that we are silencing the very frequencies that could offer meaning, connection, and a sense of our place in a singing cosmos. Yet this silence, this 27th sound, is not lost. It is simply waiting beneath the surface of all our noise, a deep, still ocean beneath the stormy waves of our daily lives. To perceive it, to truly hear the void where the sacred sounds once resided, requires a conscious and deliberate act of listening. This is the invitation that this great silence extends to each of us. It asks us to seek out quiet moments, not as an escape, but as a pilgrimage. It might be found in the deliberate focus of a meditation practice, where the goal is not to empty the mind, but to quiet the internal dialogue enough to perceive the subtle hum of our own consciousness, which might just be a faint echo of that primordial arm. It can be found in a walk through an old-growth forest, not while listening to a podcast, but while actively tuning your ear to the layers of sound, the wind, the birds, the creak of ancient trees, and then listening even deeper to the resonant silence that holds them all. It is in these gaps, these intentional pockets of quiet, that we might just catch a fleeting impression, a ghost of a vibration, a memory in the air of what was once heard so clearly. This transition from a world filled with powerful, audible magic to one dominated by a profound, telling quiet is not an ending for our story, but a crucial turning point. It sets the stage for our final contemplation. This silence is the diagnostic tool that reveals our condition, the empty space that highlights what is missing. It asks the essential questions that will guide our conclusion. Why did these sounds truly go silent? Was it an inevitable historical process, a divine withdrawal, or a choice we collectively made? And most importantly, in the face of this overwhelming quiet, is there a path to rediscovery? Can we learn to listen anew, not for a literal recreation of a lost past, but for the new and evolving harmonics of the sacred that might be emerging in our own time, waiting for us to finally turn down the volume of the world and perceive the music that is still playing, if only we have the ears to hear it? So why did the cosmic symphony fall silent? The answer is not a single event, but a confluence of historical tsunamis that washed over the human spirit, each wave eroding our ability to hear the deeper frequencies of existence. The first great shift was religious, as monolithic text-based faiths like Christianity and Islam expanded. They often did so with a mandate to supplant local, animistic beliefs. The intimate spirits of a forest or a river, who were thought to communicate through specific sounds, were recast as demons or delusions. The Christianization of Europe systematically suppressed the practices of Druids and Norse pagans, silencing the chants that spoke to Yggdrasil and the call of the Valkyries. Colonial powers, armed with both Bibles and guns, enacted this on a global scale, outlawing indigenous ceremonies, punishing the use of native languages, and forcibly removing children to residential schools where the songs of their ancestors were beaten out of them. This wasn't just a change of doctrine. It was a deliberate severing of the auditory nerve that connected entire cultures to their sacred geography, replacing a world alive with conversational sound with one where divinity spoke only through a single, silent, written text. Simultaneously, a revolution in thought was quietly unfolding that would change our perception of reality itself. The scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, for all their incredible gifts of medicine, technology, and understanding, introduced a new, powerful lens for viewing the universe: mechanism. Thinkers like Descartes proposed that the world was a great machine operating by impersonal, mathematical laws. Isaac Newton's laws of motion and universal gravitation explained the heavens with breathtaking precision, but they did so without a single note of music. The Song of the Spheres, once a profound metaphysical truth, was reduced to a poetic metaphor. The hum of the planets became the silent, calculable pull of gravity. This shift from a participatory, enchanted world to a mechanical, disenchanted one is what the German sociologist Max Weber called the disenchantment of the world. Sound was stripped of its magic and its meaning, becoming merely vibration, a physical phenomenon to be measured in hertz and decibels. Its spiritual power explained away as primitive superstition. The logos, the divine word, was silenced by the equation. Our very environment transformed to muffle these ancient frequencies. The Industrial Revolution didn't just build factories, it built a new sonic reality. The rhythmic, natural soundscape of the village, the ring of the blacksmith's hammer, the rhythm of the harvest, the clear call to prayer from a single bell tower was drowned out by the relentless, monotonous drone of steam engines, mechanical looms, and later, the internal combustion engine. This wasn't just noise, it was acoustic pollution that created a constant, low-grade static, making the subtle whisper of a muse or the guiding echo in a canyon impossible to hear. Urbanization packed people into crowded, noisy cities, further divorcing them from the natural soundscapes where these sacred vibrations were most easily perceived. We literally built a cage of noise around ourselves, and in the process, we lost the quiet necessary to listen for anything beyond our own machinery. Perhaps the most profound loss was the quiet death of oral tradition. For millennia, knowledge wasn't stored on a page but carried on the breath. The Vedic chants, the Celtic legends, the Aboriginal songlines, these were living, vibrating entities passed from teacher to student in an unbroken chain of resonant custody. This required immense discipline, deep listening, and a sacred trust. The invention of the printing press and later digital media fundamentally altered this relationship. Knowledge became visual, static, and standardized. We shifted from a culture of hearing and memorizing to one of reading and referencing. The living word became the written word. As the anthropologist David Abram argues in his book, The Spell of the Sensuous, this transition led to a kind of cultural amnesia. where we forgot the sensual, participatory relationship with the natural world that oral cultures maintained. The power of a mantra was no longer in its precise vibration felt in the chest, but in its meaning analyzed by the mind. We gained the whole library of human thought, but lost the music in the librarian's voice. This brings us to the haunting, reflective question at the heart of this great silence. Did these sacred sounds truly retreat from the world, or did we simply stop listening? The evidence suggests a painful reciprocity. The sounds, dependent on specific cultural practices, beliefs, and pristine environments, did indeed retreat as those conditions were dismantled by conquest and industrialization. But we also, as a species, made a collective choice. We chose the power of the printing press over the patience of the oral tradition. We chose the predictable world of the machine over the mysterious song of the spirit. We chose the convenience of the city over the wisdom of the wild. We turned up the volume on our own creations, and in doing so, turned a deaf ear to the older music. The silence is not merely an absence, it is the echo of 1,000 choices that prioritized mastery over mystery, efficiency over enchantment, and the tangible product over the intangible experience. It is the sound of humanity for a time, closing its ears to the universe's